Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 1 of our story. If you like this what if story and want to see part 2, let me know in the comments below. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Also, check the description for more great content and my playlist. This story was posted by 𝗵𝗃𝗺𝗺𝗺𝗺 on Wattpad. Now, let's start. The girlfriend Katsuki was tired, and frankly, he was sessed off. Being the number 2 hero and half of the Wonder Duo was his dream. Really, he was ecstatic to have achieved it. But the publicity definitely made him have days where he wanted to explode every media device he owned and retire to a desert island in peace. 5 in today's headlines: Dynamite's mystery lover. Who is she? Great explosion murder god has a dynamite date. Dynamite lover. Hero spotted exiting nightclub with brunette 2 a.m. but call for number 2 pro hero. 7 You get the gist. Katsuki scrolled a bit further down his newsfeed while lying on his couch, groaning at the shitty clickbait titles. Did he go out and get absolutely rat-assed last night? Yes. Did he do it on purpose? Yes. Did he intentionally pick up some random chick who threw herself at him? Unfortunately, yes. However, in his defense, he only did it to get his mind off of a certain green-haired, green-eyed 𝗧𝗲𝗄. Yeah, you heard that right. Over the years they'd gone from childhood friends to rivals, and now hero partners. After the events at UA, Katsuki had started to lay off Deku a lot. He didn't walk ahead of him anymore, he walked beside him. And proudly too. For there was a period of time when he wouldn't even refer to him as Deku anymore. But Izuku had put a stop to that after a few months of constant protesting. It just doesn't feel right, Kaken. Don't force yourself, okay? I appreciate it, but it's really okay. 7 He'd flashed one of his blindingly adorable smiles, the one where his eyes closed and his cheeks blushed, and Katsuki had felt his whole soul try to leave his body with the realization that their relationship had firmly re-entered friendship territory. And that he possibly wanted it to go much further than that. Then all Katsuki had to do was not F it up. Too much. He couldn't just stop being a prick overnight, but over the years he'd worked solidly to tone it down. When it came to Deku anyway. Only for Deku. There'd been therapy, a ton of therapy, and some dark days, but Katsuki had finally come to accept that his shitty behavior towards Deku stemmed from his own repressed feelings of inadequacy and his longing to be loved. All those years he'd walked Deku's love and admiration into him looking down on him, just to avoid the now painfully obvious longing to show love and affection back to the greenette. The need to always have Deku look up to him. 2 Keep your eyes on me, shitty Deku. Ultimately, Katsuki had bullied him as an outlet for his own insecurities and weaknesses. His need to dispel any feelings of needing Deku's praise and adoration led to some of the worst actions he'd ever taken in his whole DMN life. Memories of those actions often still gave him nightmares, despite the years of therapy. Pray you have a quirk in your next life. Katsuki wandered to the kitchen, putting his phone down on the counter while he poured himself another cup of coffee. No wonder he got shit-faced and went home with random wasted strangers. How the F was he ever supposed to be good enough for Deku? How could he ever tell his childhood friend, turned victim, turned best friend and hero partner that he's madly, like seriously crazily, deeply in love with him? Not gonna happen. Deku was a one-off, and Katsuki had no doubt that Broccoli Boy was a true hero even before he got his 𝗧𝗧𝗏, eat this. He was too good for everyone, and Katsuki definitely didn't deserve him. For Katsuki leaned back against the counter, clutching his coffee cup to his chest, sipping the bitter black liquid slowly. Deku. Once he started unpacking his feelings in therapy in the 3rd year of UA, it had become quickly apparent, although he denied it of course, that he had very strong not strictly platonic repressed feelings for Deku. 8 At 23, Katsuki was now in a place where he could at least admit to himself that he loved Deku. Everything about him. Even the annoying 𝗧𝗏𝗃. His mumble storms, and the way he titled his head while thinking, looking like a adorable puppy. Those massive green eyes, that somehow shimmered with flecks of gold and emerald when he gazed in wonder. Which he did constantly. The nerd found everything fascinating. Even now, he still asked random people on the street about their quirks, and wanted to talk to people regardless of their rank or profession. The difference was that now people wanted to talk to him too, their new #1 hero. And then there was the nerd's thing hot but body. DMN. He'd really come along since that little skinny kid in middle school. Now, don't get Katsuki wrong, he knew Deku had worked his butt off to get that body, and to maintain it. Deku had fed it up often enough in those early years, but his scars only seemed to make him more attractive to Katsuki. They just proved how strong Deku was. How far he would go to win. And that's why he and Katsuki balanced each other perfectly. Win to save, save to win. The symbols of peace and victory. The Thing Wonder Duo. Secretly, Katsuki thought of them as soulmates in all honesty. Complete opposites, constantly drawn to one another, stuck in each other's orbits. They went together too perfectly to be anything else. Opposite poles of the same magnet, one always pushing the other forward, to be faster, stronger, better. 5 Now, if this is the case, why the F is Katsuki drinking himself into a stupor and hooking up at 2 a.m. with random extras on his days off? 'Cause you don't think deserve him UFR. You made his life hell. Just get your kicks elsewhere and don't F up what you've worked hard for with him. It would ruin everything if he finds out. 3 Katsuki shook his head to clear his internal monologue, and reached for his phone which was vibrating on the counter. Shitty hair calling. Probably seen the headlines, and is trying to make a case, again, for confessing to Deku. He can F right off. Katsuki let the call ring off, putting his cup down on the side and rubbing a hand through his unkempt spiky hair. Kirishima was the only person, other than his therapist, that Katsuki had ever told about his feelings for Deku, and that was only because Kiri had caught him on numerous occasions staring at the greenette. Not always lustfully either. Often adoringly. Sometimes possessively. 5 Shitty Hair had been nothing but supportive, trying to convince Katsuki that Deku likely felt the same. But there were several problems with that statement, not least their complex past toxic relationship, and the fact Katsuki didn't even know if Deku liked guys. As far as Katsuki knew, Deku had never dated or been with anyone romantically or sexually. Up until a couple of years ago, neither had Katsuki. He and Deku had always been so focused on reaching the #1 spot that any thoughts of that nature genuinely didn't occur to them. Katsuki had known he loved Deku, but he wasn't gonna throw off his or Deku's shot at being #1 by pursuing something and ruining their budding partnership. 3 Katsuki had at one time promised Kirishima that he'd tell Deku once one of the duo made the #1 ranking. However, over the years the fear of ruining what they had, and reverting to their past dynamic, had snuffed that promise out. Plus then one night, Katsuki, Deku, and some other pros had attended an afterparty to an agency networking event where there had been a little too much alcohol consumed. And Katsuki had very nearly royally fed everything up. And so began his new coping mechanism. Much to Kirishima's annoyance. A roof with a view that night, Deku and Katsuki had gone to the event together. Of course they had. They're the Thing Wonder Duo. Thankfully, in Katsuki's opinion anyway, that meant they got to spend the majority of their time together. He liked having Deku close. The networking event was long and boring, but productive for the agency's recruitment programs and planning future partnerships. The afterparty, however, was much more fun. Everyone had started to let loose a little after the 4th or 5th drink. Especially when Dunceface had started ordering shots. One Katsuki was standing at the bar laughing heartily at some SHT Kiri was saying about Denki, when Deku's laugh made his head snap up to look at the freckled man. His dark green curls were bouncing as he rocked, slightly giggling at something the 𝗵𝗃 was saying. One Deku turned his head to reply to Todoroki, one hand holding his drink, while the other patted the bi-colored-haired man's shoulder playfully. Katsuki's laughter had halted, his eyes narrowing, while the grip he held on his glass became uncomfortably tight. He felt calloused fingers reach out and gently pat his own hand, removing the glass from his grip and placing it on the bar. "Dude, chill. You look like you're gonna bust a vein," Shitty Hair voiced, looking sympathetically at Katsuki. "It's just Todoroki, man, no need to get all jealous and especially since you're always using the excuse of I don't know his sexuality." Shitty Hair to get out of confessing - keep it down for FS sake. Katsuki hissed, picking up a tequila shot from the bar and throwing it back without even wincing. 4 Kiri rolled his eyes, taking a shot himself, before placing a hand on Katsuki's shoulder and leaning in. Dude, can't be jealous of another guy if you don't even know who he's into. Here's an idea, you could ask. Crazy, I know. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 chuckled before slipping his hand off of Katsuki's shoulder and proclaiming he needed to take a PSS. Katsuki grimaced, his eyes flickering back to Deku, who just so happened to look his way. The blonde turned back towards the bar a little too quickly. Be cool, Katsuki. You're not even that drunk, pull it together. Deku excused himself to Todoroki and made a beeline for Katsuki, who was throwing back another shot in preparation for facing Deku after his stupidly jealous thoughts only moments before. 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 Deku's face was flushed pink from the booze he'd drunk, his eyelids dropping a little. Yep, his thing wasted, shitty nerd. Deku motioned to the bartender holding up 2 fingers and pointing to the now empty shot glasses on the bar. Sup nerd, Katsuki greeted, that candy cane 𝗵𝗃 boring you already. He let a playful smirk adorn his handsome face, and Deku scoffed in mock offense. Not quite 𝗂𝐿, it's just I've seen a lot of people tonight that I haven't seen in a long time, which has been nice and all, but I thought I should come over. I feel like I've been neglecting my partner in crime. He directed his blinding smile at Katsuki, chuckling softly. Now it was Katsuki's turn to scoff. I don't need you to check in Deku, I'm not your 𝗵𝗃𝗲, he replied with no real malice behind his words. I know 𝗂𝐿, I know, the brunette sighed. Honestly I'd just much rather hang out with you than anyone else here. Deku shrugged slightly, as he paid for the shots. Katsuki turned his head to hide the little blush he could feel creeping on the top of his cheekbones, hoping the flush brought on by the alcohol, and Deku's own intoxicated state, would provide him with cover. The brunette slid a shot in front of Katsuki, making him look up towards it. He picked up the glass and looked towards Deku, who held his shot out before him. To us, the 𝗵𝗃 wonder duo. He laughed. For Katsuki grinned broadly, loving that Deku sometimes now cussed for effect, and gave himself all the credit for rubbing off on him with his colorful use of language. He clinked his shot with Deku's, and they both drank, green curls bouncing as Deku shook his head quickly to combat the burning sensation of the tequila as it went down his throat. You're a 𝗵𝗃 lightweight Deku, Katsuki chuckled. Who cares, we can't all be amazing at everything like you 𝗂𝐿. I don't get how your tolerance is so high. Katsuki just shrugged, ordering another round of shots for the 2 of them. He honestly wasn't faring much better than Deku, but if he was gonna admit that. The 2 spent some time at the bar, ordering more shots, and sharing banter and stories back and forth, laughing with each other. Katsuki loved just being able to spend time with Izuku, no one getting in the way, no villains attacking. Just the 2 of them. Deku suddenly threw his head back, snapping his fingers. 𝗂𝐿. Let's go to the roof. He said looking at Katsuki with a delighted expression, like he just had a megawatt idea. What the F, why would I do that nerd? It's January. It'll be 𝗵𝗃 freezing up there. I hate the 𝗵𝗃 cold, Katsuki grumbled. One 𝗂𝐿. Please. Deku pleaded, dragging out his words childishly, and grabbing Katsuki by the shoulders, shaking him a little. Just think how pretty the city will look from up there. He sighed, his eyes glazing over a little as if already imaging it. Fine nerd, but we come down when I 𝗵𝗃 say so. Can't have the #1 hero dying from 𝗵𝗃 hypothermia. Izuku almost squealed in delight, gripping Katsuki's wrist and dragging him towards the stairwell. I'll race YA. Deku shouted, taking off up the first flight of steps, while pushing off of Katsuki, making him stumble. Cheating 𝗧𝗧. Katsuki yelled, taking off after him as fast as his tipsy, okay drunk, he was drunk, feet would take him. He saw Deku ahead scrambling up the next flight of stairs on his hands and feet, giggling to himself the whole time, and couldn't help but chuckle too. 2 grown respected heroes playing like children, competing for no real reason at all but for the thrill of it. And the glory of winning, of course. Katsuki caught up to Deku on the 3rd-story landing, pulling his ankle to drag him backwards, barking a laugh as he sped past him, taking the steps 3 at a time. 𝗂𝐿. Deku whined, trying to recover the ground. Katsuki's tight black suit trousers were not exactly ideal for physical activity, but Deku didn't seem to be at any advantage in his forest green slacks. There was a flash of green lightning in Katsuki's peripheral and a gust of wind, and he knew the 𝗧𝗲 had well and truly cheated now. Deku. You bstrd. I can't use explosions in close quarters. That's not fair you but. Katsuki shouted, breathing as he reached the 6th floor landing. 2 more floors to go, and when he reached the top and pushed open the door to the gravel-covered roof, Deku was already standing there, hands on his knees, breathing lightly and laughing away to himself. Sorry Kaken. You didn't call no quirks, so I just took the advantage. He giggled, straightening up, and wiping his eyes. Yeah, nerd, but just so you know it's not a real thing win if you cheat. Katsuki scolded, catching his breath as he walked towards the roof's edge with Deku in tow. He leaned his crossed arms on the ledge, Deku coming up beside him, placing his own elbows on the ledge and leaning slightly into Katsuki's side. I told you it would be appealing, Deku breathed out, just above a whisper. Katsuki looked out at the city. The lights sparkling out of the dark, only reflected in the beauty of the twinkling stars in the clear moonless sky above. He looked over to Deku, whose eyes were reflecting the city lights, highlighting those flecks of gold and emerald Katsuki loved so much. His cheeks were flushed from the booze and the cold, his lips parted slightly as little puffs of warm air left his mouth. 5 Yeah, appealing. Katsuki sighed, admiring the man before him before snapping his attention back to the view. 10 After a few moments of comfortable silence, watching the city they protect with their lives, Katsuki felt soft hair brushing against his neck, and then the weight of Deku's head followed. He stiffened, trying not to startle the greenette as he felt his heart rate spike. Glancing over, Katsuki could just see the greenette's luscious lashes pointing down, showing that his eyes were closed. 𝗧𝗲 is just tired and drunk. Regardless, it was still nice to be this close to him. Katsuki slipped an arm around Deku's shoulder, just to keep him upright, of course, no other reason. He felt Deku's firm bicep through his white dress shirt, his strong back against his arm, soft warm breaths against his collarbone. Head out of the gutter, Katsuki. Deku also felt cold. Dude, come on, time to get you home, nerd. Katsuki shook Deku a little, only for him to groan and shake his head slowly. Katsuki chucked softly, "Fing big baby," and swept Deku up into his arms, before making his way back inside. He got a few weird looks on his way back through the party, carrying a now sleeping Deku, not that he cared, obviously. Deku never let himself relax, so anyone who judged his current state could go and F themselves. 𝗂𝗏 saw the blonde making for the exit and rushed up next to him, his eyes lighting up. Did you talk to him about why no? He said discreetly, leaning in and raising his eyebrows suggestively. No Fing shitty hair, I didn't, and I'm never gonna. Quit it already. And he's drunk anyway, stupid nerd can't handle his liquor. Kirishima followed him to the front door, where security opened the door for Katsuki to leave. Dude, I'm not surprised but I am disappointed, Kiri sighed. I'm not giving up hope, Bakugou. Keep dreaming, 𝗧𝗲. One Kirishima waved goodbye to Katsuki as he stepped out into the cold night air, and a black town car pulled up in front of him. The driver got out to open the rear door for him, and he placed Deku gently inside before getting in himself. He gave the driver Deku's address, and before long they arrived at his apartment complex. Deku could have bought a Fing mansion at this point, but insisted he only needed a 2-bed apartment, and after buying his mum a house, he said his spare income could help out charities in the city. The selfless but. 5 Katsuki asked the driver to wait for him to return and carried Deku into the building. Security checked his ID and let him enter, taking the sleeping greenette into the elevator. Fishing Deku's keys out of his briefs pocket, Katsuki stared down at the sleeping man's peaceful face as he waited for the elevator to stop. God, his appealing. His peach lips looked so inviting, and Katsuki felt himself leaning closer until the ding of the elevator pulled him back. Once he was inside Deku's apartment, he scoffed at his friend's choice of decor, the walls and shelves adorned with hero memorabilia of all kinds, including some dynamite merch, and moved swiftly to Izuku's bedroom, pulling back the white quilt to place him in the bed gently. As Katsuki pulled his hands away, his left hand brushed through Deku's soft curls, and he couldn't help but brush them back from his face. His breathing had picked up a little, and he watched the man sleeping as he removed his shoes for him, not Fing creepy at all Katsuki. He pulled the quilt over Deku, and let his thumb brush across his cheek hesitantly. When Izuku didn't wake up, Katsuki found himself kneeling down next to the bed, caressing the man's cheek, his free hand placed gently on top of the bedding. "What the F are you doing? Leave already, you creepy F. What if he wakes up?" Katsuki didn't know what had come over him. Was it the booze? The years of repressed feelings? He didn't know. What he did know was that this was what he wanted, what his heart yearned for. All he wanted to do more than anything right now was crawl into Deku's bed and pull him close into his chest, to feel his warm breath against his neck. Maybe even capture those lips with his own. How soft would they be? Just imagining letting himself press those lips against his own, sliding his tongue out to taste Izuku, pressing into his mouth to explore. Without his knowledge, Katsuki found himself leaning over Deku, his lips mere centimeters from the others. He could feel Izuku's soft breath, and the smell of the whiskey and tequila they'd drunk earlier tonight. He looked over his face, taking the opportunity to take in all of his freckles and playing dot to dot with them. Katsuki was breathing heavily now, fighting with himself. He can't kiss him like this. He can't steal this moment from either of them. "You're Fing perfect Deku." Katsuki breathed out the words as barely a whisper. Then he breathed in deeply and swallowed hard. "Get a Fing grip and keep it in your breathes, you pervert," he scolded himself. But no one was watching. He could give himself something Deku wouldn't know. With that justification, he placed a small lingering kiss on Izuku's forehead and fled from the apartment as quickly as possible. The black car had waited for Katsuki as instructed, and he gave the driver his address, wanting nothing more than to get home and sleep off his shame. He cringed at the fact he'd kissed his sleeping crush and best friend without his Fing 𝗏𝗏𝗔𝗓, even if it was only on the forehead. Honestly, the thought of him waking up and catching Katsuki there staring at him was equally nauseating. Soon he was thanking the driver and speeding up to his apartment as fast as he could. When he entered his apartment, he didn't even bother to turn on the lights. His apartment wasn't as modest as Deku's. It was modern, sleek, minimalist and full of dark grays, blacks and bronze colors. He locked the door, kicked off his shoes, and started stripping out of his suit on his way to the bathroom, not giving a F right now. He'd tidy up in the morning. He took a PSS and brushed his teeth, not being able to stop thinking about the stupid shitty nerd's face the whole Fing time. When he finally crawled into bed in his boxers and closed his eyes, all he could see was green. Fing green curly gorgeous hair, and bright sparkling green eyes with thick fluttering black lashes. "Kaken. Deku. Kiss me already, Kaken." Katsuki snapped his eyes open in his dark room. Nope. He has done really well, really Fing well, all these years to ignore fantasies of the nerd. He always managed to stop them before they even started. Now should be no different. He let out a shaky breath and closed his eyes once more, but it was no Fing good. For some reason, tonight fantasy Deku did not want to F off. But just maybe, Katsuki didn't want him to. It wasn't real, did it really matter? It's not hurting anyone, no one would know, right? Probably can't even imagine it in detail anyway. I've not got a clue what this kind of encounter would be like. Katsuki tried to assure himself as he let his eyes slip closed, green filling his mind once more, and Deku, Izuku, his appealing blushed face eradicating all other thoughts. No escape. "Kaken, kiss me. Please." "Deku. Yes, Kaken, more. Kaken, don't stop." Katsuki felt his face flush furiously as he laid in his bed, imagining himself above Izuku, nuzzling into the pale skin of his neck, possessively marking the flawless canvas beneath him with red and purple marks. The object of his longing, his muse, writhed and ummed beneath him as a pink blush spread across Izuku's body like wildfire, sweat gathering in the ridges of his abs. He thought about how he'd slide his hands down Izuku's well-toned body, which of course he did remember in great detail from every instance ever of Deku changing in front of him. Katsuki was too far gone now. He didn't think he could stop this fantasy even if he wanted to. He felt his boxers become uncomfortably tight. Without thinking, his hand was trailing down his abs and slipping beneath the hem of his boxers to grasp himself firmly, letting out small withheld grunts of pleasure with each movement. Not too long after, Katsuki drifted off to sleep naked in his bed, having used his boxers to clean away any evidence of his forbidden fantasy, disgusted in himself. When he woke the next morning, he made a decision. He definitely didn't want a Fing relationship with anyone other than Izuku, but he needed to let out this SXL tension when it built up, or risk slipping up and practically lunging for the nerd. He sighed, running his hand down his face as he checked the notifications on his phone. 𝗧𝗵𝗲𝗧𝗵𝗲 sent you a direct message. 8 Katsuki groaned, 𝗵𝗲 Instagram ho trying to F him, or offering to SCK his. It'd be a nightmare for his publicist if he was spotted, but Katsuki basically had access to an unlimited source of willing participants with which to release his SXL frustrations with zero commitments. Maybe just a little tabloid coverage, but honestly that SHT already happened and he'd never Fing done anything. He was already referred to as the pro-hero bad boy after all. For there were a couple of things he promised himself at that moment, promises he still hadn't broken. 1. He would never bring anyone back to his place. 2. He would never actually F anyone. Yes, he was still a version, by Fing choice. Some fed-up strangely hopeful part of him, despite his own denials to the possibility, wanted to reserve these things for Izuku. The core. And all of that history ultimately led to last night. Katsuki had been pulling this SHT for a couple of years. When his fantasies got too much, and his own hands didn't seem to satisfy the urge, he'd find himself itching to jump on his motorcycle and hightail it to Deku's apartment in the middle of the night to show him how much he loved him. How much he needed him. So instead, he would hit the clubs to get shit-faced and find someone equally as shit-faced to go home with. Then he'd get a hand job or a blow job, or both, while selfishly doing absolutely F all for the other person, and he'd get the F out of Dodge as soon as humanly possible. Katsuki also takes his health very Fing seriously, always attending his agency's bi-weekly blood tests and health screenings. Due to all the open wounds heroes sustain on the job, and his F-boy tendencies, it was important he got checked to make sure he'd not contracted anything. No Fing way is he getting some nasty 𝗔𝗵𝗲 STIs can go eat SHT and die. 3. He'd also gotten pretty good at managing fantasy Deku, but ever since that first time he'd allowed him to emerge in his fantasies, he couldn't hold him off anymore and he began to intrude on Katsuki's dreams more and more often. The dreamy F kept coming back, and now Katsuki went out looking for a real-world release once a month or so. Kirishima knew, and every time his publicist had to deal with another paparazzi sighting, or some woman selling a story, Shitty Hair would hear about it and phone him up to check in on him, giving him a lecture like the parent of some delinquent corny teenager. When Kiri had confronted Katsuki about it the first time a story came out, he told him the whole truth, just happy to have one person who knew everything. He'd never tell him, but aside from Deku, Shitty Hair was his closest friend. And a Fing good friend at that. The best actually. 3. When Katsuki's phone vibrated again as he made his way back to the couch, he checked the caller ID, took a deep breath, and answered. So, there's pictures and video of you leaving the club this time bro smooth, real smooth cat. Kirishima's voice came loudy through the phone, and Katsuki had to pull it back from his ear slightly. Yeah well, FM. F her too, L don't even know her Fing name, and I'll never need to. Katsuki said sternly. But you didn't though, right? Kiri asked, concerned. What? You didn't F her. You promised yourself dude, and I promised I'd always hold you to it. Ding, he's too good of a friend for a SHT like me. Nope. My promises are still intact SHT4 brains, and you know I don't Fing lie. Just a sloppy mediocre blowjob. I was outta there in about 10 Fing minutes. I wanna say I'm proud of you bro, but we both know I'm not, Kiri replied dejectedly. 6. And I've decided I don't do kissing now. It's too Fing NTMT. Makes them all clingy and SHT. I can't be Fing dealing with that honestly. Again, wow, well done cat. Solid work. Kiri said sarcastically, and a little harshly, with a small exasperated laugh at the end that held absolutely no joy. He must have heard the bite in his own voice as he sighed, and perked up a little. I was on patrol this morning, and I bumped into your lover boy by the way. Katsuki perked up himself, sitting up straight on the coach. He hadn't seen Deku in a week, as he'd been on a special mission out of the city, and Katsuki had a few days off but on call. Not that they were ever not on call in their line of work. They texted a few times, when Deku was able, but he'd not heard from him or that he'd gotten back, which was honestly really out of character. Deku was nearly always bothering Katsuki in any free time they had when they were apart. Sending him stupid gifs, memes, chatting up a storm or providing him with unsolicited quirk info and hero news updates. So hearing he was back and he'd gone straight to work without a single thing text. Katsuki did not like the sound of that. It made his gut twist a little. When did he get back? Katsuki asked, taking 𝗧𝗓𝗏 aback a little at his serious tone. Normally mentioning Midoriya cheered Katsuki up, but 𝗧𝗓𝗏 thought he had a good anecdote to share that supported his argument for confessing. And he didn't think it was gonna brighten Katsuki's spirit any. Well, here goes nothing, the redhead thought before pressing on. Last night apparently, Katsuki's heart thudded against his chest. If he hadn't gone out fing around, he might have realized he hadn't heard from Deku by now. He was actually kinda bummed out this morning, Bakugou. 𝗧𝗓𝗏 planted the seed for his argument, and waited for Katsuki to respond. Why? Did the shitnerd get hurt or something? Katsuki's heart dropped, and his stomach was now doing a whole thing gymnastic routine. No, nothing like that, dude. It's just, well, the celeb drama channel was on in the break room and when I walked past you and that chick were all over the screen. 𝗧𝗓𝗏 paused, but when Katsuki didn't interrupt he carried on. They reckon they had her on the line, and she was saying how you two have been seeing each other on a regular basis for months, and you're really in love yada yada yada. You know the type. I'm sure your publicist will handle it, man. Katsuki couldn't help but let a growl leave his throat. No thing offense, but being blunt about it, he can only get hard for these chicks by thinking about Izuku the whole thing time, and last night was no exception. While he was face-fucking her with his eyes squeezed shut, he was imagining Deku's peach lips stretched wide. And boy did that do it for him. For he knows it's wrong, but that's the whole filthy thing truth. Thing sue him for being honest. Anyway, 𝗧𝗓𝗏 continued, Midoriya was sitting in there staring at the TV and his eyes were glazed over, dude. He looked like he wanted to cry, cat. Like it physically hurt him to know you'd been with someone in that way. I'm telling you, he didn't like it one bit. He likes you too, dude, and the sooner you do something about it the better, 'cause I think he's actually a little over your 𝐒𝐻𝐻. What the F do you mean but? Katsuki snapped, angry at himself more than anything. If 𝗧𝗓𝗏's account of Deku's reaction was accurate, then he'd provided some pretty strong evidence there. But what if he was just upset that Katsuki was being used by the media to sell stories again? Or that this woman, who was supposedly close to the Greenette's best friend and partner, was dishing out details about his private life? Both were still options. Deku is super empathetic and caring after all. I mean, I brought you up in conversation, man. I asked if he'd been in touch with you since he got back and he just said he'd been busy. When I said you'd obviously love to hear from him, he just did this week but smile and said he'd check in with you when he can. 𝗧𝗓𝗏 sighed again, this time sadly. Sorry Bakugou, but does that sound like the Midoriya you know and love? 'Cause I don't think so, man. 𝗬𝗧𝗏 stayed silent for a while before checking Katsuki was still there. Yeah, I'm still here, shitty hair, just thinking. He paused again, then voiced his thoughts out loud to get a second opinion. Let's pretend for one minute that Deku ever liked me in that way. Then seeing me in the news with all these hoes would 𝗑𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏 but, wouldn't it? Katsuki trailed off towards the end, already knowing the answer, pinching the bridge of his nose as a new layer of guilt unfurled inside his chest. I think you already know it would, bro. Imagine if it was the other way around. Someone so much as looks at Midoriya and you wanna blow up the nearest object of the person's face. Katsuki yelled, as an obvious and sudden realization hit him. I'm a thing idiot. 20 Calm down, bro. Midoriya will come round, he's probably just hurting and he's not one to hold grudges, he's too nice for his own good, 𝗧𝗓𝗏 assured him, but I think I've proved my point now, right? You gotta tell him already. 𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏. I'm a selfish prick. I was so busy trying to control own urges, convincing myself he'd never return my feelings, that if he does feel some 𝗧𝗍𝗍 for me then I've been hurting him all over again this whole thing time. Katsuki let out a deep frustrated growl, pulling his ash blonde spike slightly. Sorry cat, but yeah. That about sums up what I think is happening. 3. There were shouts on Kiri's end of the line, and Shitty Hair called out to someone to say he was on his way. Look dude, I gotta go, but go see Mido when he gets off shift at 6, Kiri rushed out, hanging up the call. I need to get to the bottom of this SHT and there's only one way to do that. Talk to the nerd. Who let the dogs out? 13. Katsuki spent the majority of the day trying to stay busy. Trying because although he had plenty of SHT to do, he couldn't seem to stop zoning out to imagine how the conversation would go. At one point while he was jogging around his neighborhood, he'd even started to rehearse his chat with the nerd out loud, earning some pretty funny looks from the people he passed. They of course didn't know he was pro-hero Dynamite, because his beanie and oversized hoodie were clearly fooling everyone. 2. He'd considered a lot of options, and how much he should disclose to the nerd. He could just walk straight up to the nerd and pull him into a heated makeout session. That was a strong option, although it didn't really communicate how he really felt towards the green-eyed hero. Other drafts of the conversation went on too long, and brought in far too many details about their depressing past relationship. He decided he'd just speak from the heart, but be sure to hit a couple of key points. Those being, I fing love you and I'm fing sorry. It dawned on Katsuki that this conversation was quickly becoming a confession. Despite all his rehearsing, he decided that it would sort itself out, and hopefully result in Katsuki and Deku becoming an item. Okay, fine, there'd probably be a lot of talking between the confession and officially becoming Deku's boyfriend, and sure Katsuki would be emotionally exhausted by the end of it, but it would all be worth it to finally have Izuku in his arms. 1. Katsuki waited until 6 o'clock that evening to start getting ready to leave his apartment. He needed to give Deku time to get back home after his shift ended, and if he got ready too early he wouldn't have been able to stop himself creepily hanging around outside his partner's door before he even got home. He laid out some clothing options from his closet. Katsuki wanted his outfit to show how hot he is. Yeah, he knows how hot he is, get the F over it, but he also didn't want to look too much of a tryhard. In the end he settled for tight black jeans that hugged his assets, with slick black boots and belt, with a dark red button-up shirt that he knew for a fact was slightly too small for him. It was just tight enough to show off the outline of his muscles as he moved. 3. Spraying deodorant, not cologne. He knows from their childhood that Deku likes his natural bitter caramel scent, and running his hands through his soft blonde spikes, he grabbed his car keys, wallet and phone, and walked out of the door. 7. He was taking his car tonight, and he hopped in blasting romantic anthems on his way over to Deku's place. What can he say? He's a sucker for a ballad. 3. By the time he arrived at Deku's building, his hands were sweating an unhealthy amount, especially considering the fact he has a nitroglycerine-like substance for sweat, and his heart was pounding loud as F in his ears. He exited his car, letting the winter air cool off his skin, and shook his head, bouncing on his heels slightly like a boxer psyching himself up for a fight. Slapping his own cheeks, he gave himself a pep talk in the parking lot. 1. It's just Deku, you talk to him all the damn time. Breath you button, let's do this. 1. He flashed his ID at the building's security staff and went straight for the elevator before he could pee out. While waiting for the elevator he texted Shitty Hair. 6:52 p.m, Oi shithead, I'm going to Deku's to talk to him now. If this ends badly I will hunt you down, shave your shitty hair off and then shove it so far up your butt you'll be coughing up hairballs for weeks to come. 6:53 p.m. You better hope this goes well you F-er. 10. Katsuki knew he was taking his frustrations and fears out on Kiri, but F it, he could handle it. As he entered the elevator, pressing Deku's floor number, his phone vibrated. Shitty Hair, 6:54. Good luck bro. Let me know how it goes as soon as you can. I'm telling you man, Mido is into you. I'm already hearing wedding bells face throwing a kiss. 16. Katsuki scoffed, pushing his phone into his pocket as the elevator doors slipped open on Deku's floor. He breathed deeply trying to calm his nerves and keep his ribs intact from the assaults his heart kept making on them, and started down the corridor. Just before he was about to turn the corner he heard soft laughter. He'd know that laughter anywhere. Deku. What the F is he laughing at out in the corridor? For as Katsuki rounded the corner, his crimson eyes narrowed in on a certain gorgeous brunette, leaning back against his apartment door still in his hero costume. He had one foot propped up against the door, both hands behind his back, with a wide smile plastered on his face as he looked up at that Fing brainwashing freak. 7 Shinsu was leaning against the wall close to Deku, legs crossing at his ankles. One had propped up against the wall next to his head, while the other slipped lazily into his front jean pocket. 2 Katsuki's feet didn't stop walking as his mind reeled from the scene before him. Shinsu was leaning down to speak close to Deku's ear with a grin on his face, and Katsuki couldn't take any more of him being all up in the greenette space. "Oi! Mind F. What the ever-loving F are you doing up in Deku's personal space?" he shouted as he approached. 8 green and violet eyes snapped up to meet crimson, but Katsuki's were narrowed on the purple-haired hero. Fire danced in his eyes as he came to a stop mere feet from the pair. Deku had shifted to stand up straight, looking slightly uncomfortable with Katsuki's sudden appearance. Honestly, it hurt Katsuki's heart to see Deku react that way to him, but he knew how he'd sounded when he yelled out, and he wanted to tear the F into Shinsu right about now. 3 He was too close and it made Katsuki's nervously twisting gut only knot itself tighter. "Kaken, what are you doing here?" Deku asked, looking both annoyed and worried at the same time, while Shinsu pushed himself from the walk and came up beside the greenette. "I didn't hear from you that you were back, why the F not?" "Aizu, looks like Bakugou was worried about you." "Kinda touching really," Shinsu smirked. 5 Aizu. Bakugou. This effer has a death wish. 2 Katsuki snarled at Shinsu, who matched him in height but not in muscle. If he had to fight this effer he most definitely would. "What the F did you call me eye-bags?" Katsuki grunted out, "The F are you doing here?" "Kaken, Shinsu is my friend. He offered to take me out to know, you know what, it's actually none of your business." 5 Deku had stepped up to Katsuki now, green eyes burning with anger. "Wait, anger. The F is he angry at me for?" 5 Don't worry Aizu, the dog's bark doesn't scare me. Shinsu chuckled at Katsuki, "If I threw a stick, you'd leave, right?" 3 Deku grunted as he caught a laugh in his throat at Shinsu's insult, while Katsuki's face contorted with rage. "Arrogant BSing, if you're not afraid of my bark then I'll make sure as hell you'll be afraid of my Fing bite you F. I'll dash enough." Green lightning flashed up around Deku's muscular body and both Katsuki and Shinsu went quiet and absolutely still. It took a lot for Izuku to get sessed off, and he looked sessed off. He turned and opened the door to his apartment. "Shinsu, go inside, I'll be in soon, this'll only take a few minutes." 6 When Shinsu only continued to glare at Katsuki and didn't make any effort to move, Deku shot him a glance and nodded towards the open door. Shinsu furrowed his brow, but made for the door, squeezing Deku's shoulder slightly as he walked by causing Katsuki to growl low in his throat. 5 Once the apartment door closed, Deku deactivated his quirk and sighed, rubbing his temples. "What do you want, Kaken? And what the hell was that? The way you just treated Shin?" he asked, his voice still keeping its angry tone, but he also sounded plain tired. 2 Katsuki was like a dog with a bone. He'd completely lost sight of why he was even here in the first place, regardless of Deku's question. He could still see Shinsu and Deku together in his mind's eye. "Why the F is he here? And why didn't you contact me when you got back, Deku? It's not like you, and it's Fing annoying that you ghosted me all day and yet this effer's all up in your personal space." Katsuki said, anger dripping from every word. 1 Deku's eyes were wide with disbelief. "You're joking, right? Are you? Wait, are you jealous?" He threw his hands in the air, letting out a small almost crazed chuckle before ruffling his own hair, calming himself. 3 Katsuki shifted uncomfortably, crossing his arms across his broad chest, and looking away. He couldn't lie, but he could refuse to answer. "Not that it's any of your business, but Shinsu asked if he could take me out to dinner, and it's been a long week, Kaken, so I wanted to hang out with my friend. I have more friends than just you, you know. Is that okay with you?" he finished sarcastically. 4 Katsuki ped an eyebrow, frowning deeply. He was being a sassy 𝗧𝗍, which meant Katsuki had really crossed a line and majorly fed up here. "And I did not ghost you all day, Kaken, but I saw the flippin' news and I figured you'd have enough on your plate dealing with the fallout of your secret lover and all. Not to mention that you could have called me too, you know what." Katsuki's eyes blew wide. Deku really believed that clickbait trash. What do you mean what? You didn't contact me. The Kaken, and I just presumed you were busy with your girlfriend. Wait, now it was Katsuki's turn to wonder if Deku was jealous. Yet, ultimately the greenette was right. Katsuki had been so focused on getting to this point that he'd not reached out to Deku either. But he had to put this SHT about having a girlfriend to bed. Deku, that's not. Izuku's apartment door swung open and Shinsu stepped out, wrapping an arm around the greenette's shoulders. You've been more than a few minutes, Aizu. The dog's still barking here. Shinsu said, laughing slightly as he looked at Katsuki. You're right, Shin. This conversation is over. I need to get ready to go out. Deku turned without so much as another glance or word to Katsuki, entering his apartment. Katsuki made to follow, only to be met by a strong hand pushing against his chest. Shinsu sighed as Katsuki looked up to meet his knowing gaze, crimson eyes clearly questioning who the F he thought he was to lay hands on him. Katsuki could already feel his palms heating up with the urge to blow the ugly F's face off. Look man, despite what you might think, I actually respect you a lot, but how do you have the right to be jealous of who he's with? Especially when he has to see who you're fing all over the press. Shinsu said quietly, shaking his head sadly as Katsuki's eyes widened. Think of a proper way to prove yourself to him. 'Cause although green would look great on you, jealousy doesn't suit you man. 19 Shinsu patted him on the shoulder, before turning away and leaving Katsuki standing dumbfounded in the corridor. The blonde heard the soft click of the apartment door closing after Shinsu, and the lock sliding into place. What the F was that supposed to mean? Thank F for Kirishima 7 now. At times Katsuki could be dense as F when it came to this SE. Don't get him wrong, but on this occasion he could obviously tell that Shinsu was trying to telling him something. He just couldn't get his head around how Shinsu had thought anything was between Deku and him that would lead the insomniac to address it as he did. Then there was the fact that as much as he wanted to blow Deku's Fing door down, storm in and make his case, he reminded himself that Deku currently wasn't even aware he had a case to make. And, in all honesty, Deku looked DMN Fing angry, and Katsuki didn't want to kill what relationship they did have because he was a jealous Fing idiot. Although, angry Deku had definitely been filed away in Katsuki's mind for when Fantasy Deku next came calling. He had a lot to process, and somehow seemed even further from confessing, so without any further hesitation he texted Shitty Hair while leaving Deku's apartment. 7:24 p.m. Meet me at my place ASAP 7:24 p.m. And bring beer Shitty Hair, 7:31 p.m., bro. That bad here? I'll be there soon man, hold it together till I get there. 5 Katsuki slammed the car door closed, starting the engine, before slamming his hands against the steering wheel. That really couldn't have gone much worse. Why the F didn't he just calmly ask Deku if they could talk? But no. Shinsu was openly gay, and even if the hothead didn't know Deku's sexuality, the freak's presence had been enough to put him on edge. The slightest whiff of an interested party around Deku and he turns into a Fing dog trying to mark his territory. SHT, 𝐈𝐵𝐺 was right. I am a Fing dog. 6 Katsuki groaned as he pulled out of the complex and made his way home. When he got into his apartment, he headed to his bedroom and threw on his comfy black sweats and hoodie, before moping back to the living room to fall face first into the couch and wait for Kiri. The blonde laid there trying not to think about anything until Shitty Hair arrived, and failing miserably. He was sessed off, confused, and pretty Fing miserable that he psyched himself up for nothing. He Fing failed. And it wasn't something he was used to. Putting it mildly, it Fing scared. There was a knock at the door before Kiri let himself into the unlocked apartment with a 12-pack of beers on his arm. He stood over Katsuki, who opened one red eye to look up at him. Kiri set down the beers on the table, taking one out for himself and one for his friend. He held a beer out towards the blonde with a soft smile on his face. Okay, start at the beginning bro. I'm all ears and I've got nowhere to be. 6 Katsuki relayed everything that had happened to Kiri, making sure to tell him all that was said, exactly as it was said. Kiri almost felt like he should have been making notes with the way his bro recounted the events, but he stayed quiet, only nodding occasionally to show he was still listening until Katsuki finished and went silent. He took another long drink from his beer, brows scrunched in thought, as Katsuki cracked open his third can. Too well, Katsuki said after some time. Kiri scratched his chin, deciding honesty was the best policy. Honestly, Kat, it sounds like you stormed in there and fed yourself over. No 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗍, tell me something I don't know 𝗧𝗑𝗫, Katsuki scoffed in reply. Kiri leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Fine, here's how I see it, dude. He put down his empty beer can, clasping his hands together. You saw Shinsu and jumped to conclusions, even though you keep saying you don't know for sure 𝗵𝗲𝗍 swings that way. Katsuki eyed him curiously. Go on. 𝗵𝗲𝗍 not only brought up the fact that he knew you were jealous, but also that he thought you had a girlfriend. Clearly the idea of you being with someone upsets him, and he was 𝗧𝗠 you had the audacity to be jealous, right? 2. Yep, really 𝗧𝗠. Katsuki rubbed his face, mirroring Kiri's posture to listen intently. So put 2 and 2 together, dude. He's practically screaming that he doesn't want you to be with anyone else. He was telling you that his 𝗧𝗠 you've acted jealous when he's held back and let you get on with throwing yourself at all these women. His 𝗧𝗠 you can be jealous of him when he's held back his own jealousy when it comes to you. 1. I guess that could make sense, the blonde trailed off in thought, feeling guilt retching in his stomach. Also, Shinsu is one of 𝗵𝗲𝗺𝗺's best pals. I don't think that he was hooking up with 𝗵𝗲𝗺. No man, he was there to take him out for dinner because. Kiri smacked his thigh, feeling the pieces come together, because he was comforting him. He was upset his crush was on the news with his new lover. 1. Kiri beamed like he just solved a murder mystery and it was colonel mustard in the ballroom 𝗬𝗬𝗧𝗔 the lead 𝗵𝗃𝗃. He looked expectantly at the blonde. Before the hothead could reply to his friend's assumed revelation, Kiri continued, he was on a roll, there was no stopping him now. 17. And then there's what Shinsu said to you. Kiri could feel it all coming together so clearly and he just needed the blonde to see it. To be honest, Katsuki already knew where this was going, and it made his heart PND, and his cheeks flush while his guts cramped with regret. He just needed his reed-headed friend to say it all out loud so he knew he wasn't 𝗵 crazy. He said it himself, especially when he sees who you're 𝗵 all over the presses. That means 𝗵𝗲𝗺 was upset by it. Oh, and. Kiri exclaimed excitedly, he said green would look good on you. He meant 𝗵𝗲𝗺𝗺. Deku is all green, all day bro. He meant Deku would look good on you. 3. Kiri let out a short laugh. Shinsu, so manly helping out his bro for Katsuki scared in a deep breath, the Shinsu was trying to help. 6. Yeah bro. He was trying to let you know you had a chance. You just gotta do something big no, something to show 𝗵𝗲𝗺 you're not 𝗵 around. 3. Could it be? Did he really have a chance with Deku? All the signs were right 𝗵 there, and boy was he an idiot. It could indeed be that Deku had been jealous and hurt by Katsuki's flings, even if just platonically, but Deku had clearly spoken with Shinsu about his feelings, so maybe it wasn't so platonic. Shinsu wanted to see his friend happy, and so the freak had to have been trying to give Katsuki a push in the right direction without breaking his friend's trust. Right. 2. Green would look 𝗵 great on me, Katsuki thought, smirking. 6. He swigged his beer again. He had a lot to arrange to pull this off, and he had a ton to apologize for too. He'd hurt Deku by trying not to lust after him. Katsuki pushed away the unhelpful thoughts that tried to cloud his mind, about how much time he'd already wasted when he could have been with his Deku. 2. Katsuki smacked his beer can on the table, with way more force than was necessary, and moved crimson eyes burning with determination to hold his friend's gaze. Kiri, call both squads. Find out when we can all go out together. Make it happen, shitty hair. I've got a 𝗵 plan. 3. Kiri literally fist bumped the air. Who can blame him? He's been waiting for this for years. Before grinning at his friend, finally man. What's the plan bro? For let's show that nerd I 𝗵 love him. Reservation for Bakugou. Katsuki had work the next day and he did his best to show the nerd he was sorry without saying it. It's not that he didn't want to say he was sorry, but he figured as someone who rarely if ever apologizes, it would have more of an impact if he saved it for the endgame of his plan. He bought the nerd his favorite caramel macchiato on the way to work, as well as a freshly baked cinnamon roll, and made his way to the office he shared with Deku. 3. Katsuki really was starting to think years of hits to the head had killed his brain cells. Deku's favorite drink was literally the drinkable embodiment of Katsuki's natural scent. Cute shitnerd, 𝗵 making me soft. And corny, Katsuki thought as he wondered sinfully if the nerd had thought that maybe his favorite drink was as close as he might get to tasting Katsuki. Katsuki had never thought about it, but he guessed it was possible he tasted like bitter caramel too. For one day soon I'll ask Deku if I taste better than this shitty drink. 9 Katsuki pushed open the door to his and Deku's shared office with a sleazy smirk on his face, only to have his face drop when he saw the 𝗵𝗃𝗶𝗍𝗄 leaning on the edge of Deku's desk. 1 The blonde quickly corrected his face into a slight smile. Not wanting a repeat of last night, he pushed down a growl, "I am not a 𝗵𝗃𝗲 𝗧𝗏," and confidently strode up to Deku's desk, which the greenette was sitting comfortably behind wearing a green hoodie and a small smile on his face as he looked up at Todoroki. 1 Now, as far as the hothead knew, the bestiary was straight, but he'd been extremely close to Deku since their first year at UA, and who's to say they never experimented together in high school. Not an image Katsuki needed right now. Or ever. "Morning, nerd," Katsuki said, flashing Deku his biggest grin, then showing Todoroki a small grimace as he nodded towards him, "Halfie." 6 Deku's smile left his face. He just looked at Katsuki blankly, his big green eyes seemingly searching red ones for something he needed to see. 5 Morning Kaken. "Bakugou," Todoroki greeted. "Well, Midoriya, I'll send you that info soon, and thanks again for the help." Todoroki pushed himself away from Deku's desk, before leaning forward, brushing the nerd's soft green curls behind his ear and whispering closely to him. 8 Katsuki's grip on the items in his hands tightened, his eye twitching, as he kept his composure, letting his resting beach face cover the fact that the icy hot bestiary was way too close to Deku. 2 Deku's eyes, which were looking away from his partner, widened before closing in one of his signature smiles, being followed by a adorable giggle. "You icy hot, I'm supposed to make him laugh like that, not you, you BST." Todoroki pulled away from Deku, making his way out of the office, the smallest of smirks present on his face. "See you later, Midoriya. Bakugou." With a slight wave he was gone, and as the office door closed, Katsuki bit his tongue to stop himself demanding to know what Todoroki had whispered, and remembered the things he'd bought for the nerd. He set the drink and sweet treat down on Deku's desk. The greenette looked them over, before glancing up at the blonde. "What's this for Kaken?" Katsuki could feel a tint spreading on his cheeks, as he scratched his neck. Sheepishly, "It's your favorite. Caramel macchiato and a cinnamon roll. I know how you don't look after yourself when you're busy, nerd." Happiness flashed across Deku's face before he coughed slightly to cover it and gave a small smile. "Thanks, Kaken, but you don't have to buy me things because you feel guilty about last night." 1 Katsuki scoffed, pushing his hands into the pockets of his black jeans. "Teach, and here I was thinking you knew me better than anyone, nerd." Izuku pared a brow at the blonde, reaching out for his drink. "I never do anything I don't want to do, shitty Deku." Katsuki turned to make his way to his own desk. "And that's why I'm taking you out for dinner after patrol, nerd. Wear something nice, effer." For he heard Deku choke slightly on his drink as he sat in his own chair. He allowed a wide grin to spread across his face as he leaned down to retrieve some paperwork, hiding his own expression from the greenette. When he looked back over at the nerd with his usual scowl back on his face, the freckled hero was flushed a appealing pink that the blonde loved to see on him. "I caused that. Take that, you Candycane F5, okay Kaken." He stood up from his desk, green eyes awash with nerves and excitement. "I got a meeting now, but I'll be back around lunch, okay?" As he made to leave the room, clutching his drink and his cinnamon roll, Katsuki called him back. "Deku. Last night. I was out of order. It won't happen again." 1 Katsuki maintained eye contact with Deku the whole time, watching his eyebrows rocket upward in shock, before blinking several times and shaking his head slightly as if clearing his thoughts. Deku closed his eyes for a moment and took a deep breath, composing himself, and when he opened them again, he flashed Katsuki one of his sun-bright smiles and nodded his head in reply before leaving the office without another word. Katsuki sighed, rubbing his hands down his face as he slumped back in his chair. Step 1 was complete. He and the nerd were gonna be okay, they were just as they were before last night. At least he hadn't completely fed up yet. Thank F the nerd was forgiving. The blonde worked his way through to lunch, taking some time to text Shitty Hair and let him know he and Deku were okay, and he'd be taking him out to dinner after work. Shitty hair, 11:57 a.m. That's awesome, bro. I've talked to the squads. Everyone is on board, bro. All of the Deku squad too. Which has got to be a good sign, right, man? 11:58 a.m. Oi, you sure they're all in? Even thing half and half. 11:58 a.m. You got any dates for a meetup yet? Shitty hair, 12:02 p.m. Yeah, why wouldn't Todo be in? Thinking face, and it's looking like this coming Friday could work, my man. You down? 12:04 p.m. Friday works, I'll book the SHT we discussed. And I don't trust the BSTRD round Deku. I'm keeping my eyes on him. Hair for brains, 12:04 p.m. And don't send me stupid thing emojis. Shitty hair, 12:06 p.m. Lay off, Todo man. Don't be the dog Shinsu said you were. And sorry bro, I just can't stop. Shrug ## smirking face throwing dancer runner # waving hand sign. 7 Katsuki left his office for lunch, intent on finding the nerd and eating with him before they went on patrol. 2 A very grubby and tired Katsuki kicked his locker door closed as he headed to the showers at the agency. It was nearly 6 in the afternoon and he and Deku had kicked a whole bunch of villain, but today, saved every thing person that was in danger, and made it out alive. All in a good day's work for the Thing Wonder duo. Now all Katsuki wanted to do was take a searing hot shower, put on the clean clothes he'd brought with him, and meet Deku for their date. Deku had asked Katsuki to pick him up from his apartment. Kaken. I don't have nice clothes with me. Wait, why do you have nice clothes with you? Katsuki had of course completely ignored his question, and told him to be ready by he'd packed his good clothes to force his brain to think positively about asking Deku to dinner, because he had to convince himself there was no way the shitnerd was gonna turn him down. Before he knew it, Katsuki was sitting outside Deku's apartment complex in his car, texting the nerd to let him know he was outside. A few minutes passed, and Deku emerged from the lobby looking. Well, let's just say Katsuki swallowed so hard he thought his Diamond Adam's apple might never come back up. 3 He hit himself on the chest, correcting his breathing, and clearing his love-struck eyes, taking Izuku in all his glory as he walked towards the car. Deku had tight maroon slacks on, perfectly fitting his slim waist, with matte black dress shoes, and a white dress shirt which hugged his toned form just right. He had rolled his shirt sleeves up around his forearms, and the first few buttons of his shirt were open, showing the milky white skin that Katsuki knew was covered with a scattering of tan freckles. The nerd looked fine as F on this cool spring evening. As he got closer to the car, he ruffled his green curls, and waved sheepishly at the blonde, who quickly realized he was still staring and rushed to leave the car. You look good, nerd, Katsuki said, as casually as he could, hiding his nerves with a confident smirk. You clean up nice. Deku's face went red faster than the waters of a shark-infested pool on feeding day, and he still looked good. 3 Thanks, I guess. You too, Kaken, he stuttered, before walking around the car. Katsuki quickly followed, opening the passenger door for him. The brunette eyed him suspiciously before muttering a thanks, Kaken, and climbing in. 2 Katsuki closed Deku in before getting back behind the wheel, catching the nerd's eyes as he fastened his seatbelt. He flashed his best toothy grin, and pulled the car out of the lot. The drive to the restaurant was one relaxed and silent, with quiet music playing on the radio. Every time Katsuki glanced towards Du, he seemed to be checking him out, a slight flush on his cheeks, and the blonde couldn't help but be thrilled by that. 5 Katsuki was really starting to wonder if this had been happening the whole time, and he was so in denial that Deku could ever like him back due to their complex history, that he'd been painfully oblivious. 8 He himself had paired tapered black slacks with a tight dark blue dress shirt and patent black accessories. He'd changed his usual black studded earring for an emerald stone in homage to the brunette, and of course he'd left a few buttons open on his shirt so that the top of his tan chest was visible when he moved. They valeted the car at the restaurant, and Deku's eyes grew large as they stepped through the doors into the foyer. Kaken, this place is too fancy. Deku whispered anxiously. Tch, nerd, you do realize you're the #1 thing hero. This place would pay you to eat here, the blonde chuckled. 5 The waitress approached them, not even asking for their names or their reservation. She made small talk with them, well, mostly with Deku, as she led them through the packed restaurant and up an ornate spiral staircase to the second floor. To Izuku's surprise, the entire floor was deserted, and right at the back in front of a huge picture window was a single table for two. Deku's breath caught a little in his throat as began an internal mumble storm as to why the heck Kaken had brought him to somewhere so fancy. And dare he say, romantic. I'll let you both get settled, and we'll bring over the drinks you ordered soon, sir, the waitress said, addressing Katsuki before bowing politely and leaving the room. Deku walked close to the window and admired the view out over the city, Katsuki following close behind. Kaken! Izuku turned his green shimmering eyes filled with wonder towards Katsuki's own crimson gaze. It's appealing, Kaken. It reminds me of every time we've ever sat on the roofs overlooking the city during our night patrols. Deku was smiling softly as he shifted his eyes back to the view. Katsuki couldn't help but smile to himself too, remembering another night when they'd been on a rooftop, a night where he'd admired a sleeping Greenette and regretfully chickened out of making a move. After a few moments Deku's face dropped, and he quickly looked back at the handsome blonde next to him. What's this all for, Kaken? Is everything okay? Oh god, you're not leaving the agency, are you? You've got a new job. Or maybe it's news about your girlfriend. Are you getting married? Oh no, are you sick? Oh gosh, are you sick, Kaken? Is it -5? Deku had turned himself to face Katsuki during his mutter storm, and the blonde reached out, putting his hand gently over Izuku's mouth to silence him. Deku's glassy wide eyes stayed that way, wide and questioning. Katsuki pulled his hand back slightly, letting it trail down Izuku's face, his thumb lazily stroking a freckled cheek as he drew himself back slowly. He cleared his throat, feeling his cheeks heat up and not wanting his voice to betray him too. I don't have to have a reason to treat you, nerd. But I guess last night made me see I can be a lot, of a JRK sometimes when it's not exactly necessary. And I just wanted to hang out without SHT getting in the way, why no? He was still saving the word sorry for another time, but so far today was going better than he expected. The Greenette was fidgeting with his hands, and nodded slowly. Yeah, I guess we don't get to spend a lot of our free time together. He looked back out at the view. Well, thank you, Kaken, I appreciate it, he smiled, green eyes meeting red. Katsuki nodded and gestured towards their table, where he made the Greenette blush again by pulling his chair out for him to sit down. The waitress came back with their drinks, 2 old fashions with a twist, and a Coke on the side for Deku, who thanked both the waitress and Katsuki before taking a sip. It had kinda become a tradition for the two to drink whiskey together over the years, but Deku was still a thing lightweight. We'll bring your orders out as soon as they're ready, sir, but if you need anything at all, just press the button on your table and I'll be right over. She smiled brightly, before leaving the two alone again. Our orders? Deku asked, tilting his head adorably in confusion, as hadn't been given a menu. Yeah, nerd, I took the liberty of using my hero status to get them to make something that's not on the menu here. Katsuki smirked, sipping his drink. Izuku's cheeks tinted again. This is too much, Kaken, he mumbled barely above a whisper. Oi! Deku, look at me, shitnerd, Katsuki said sternly, and Deku fixed his eyes on the hothead's tan face. We work thing hard, you more than anyone. Just enjoy it. That'd be thanks enough for me. Deku looked worried for another moment, but then he sipped his drink and let out a small hum of acknowledgement. Right. Kaken is always right. Thanks, Kaken, I will enjoy it. God, Katsuki's heart may have just stopped in that moment, because he was determined to enjoy himself for Katsuki, because he adored him. He always had, and the blonde knew that much. Whether it could become romantic on Izuku's end was still questionable, but Katsuki knew the Greenette definitely loved him in some way. But Katsuki knew that he loved Deku in all the ways it was possible to love another person. Before long, Deku was thanking Katsuki and the waitress again when katsudon was placed in front of him and he squealed in delight. The blonde dug into his own spicy curry while the nerd stuffed his face. It's good. Katsuki asked Izuku, who had his cheeks full of food. It's good, Deku laughed, and Katsuki's heart soared. Not as good as Kaken's katsudon though. If he was high before, Katsuki was downright atmospheric right now. This cute nerd and his compliments making me feel all gooey and SHD1. While they were eating they talked about work, their friends, their families. They shared stories, and laughed with each other, taking their time to clear their plates, and carrying on talking well beyond the end of their meal. The waitress came to remove the dishes, bringing Deku another Coke, and Katsuki a black coffee since he had to drive them back. In the small silence that followed, Izuku watched the view, and Katsuki watched Izuku. His soft features, the freckles littering his cheeks, and his slightly stronger jaw now that he was older. His dark green curls were messy, but perfectly placed, some of the longer ones tucked behind one of his ears. Then Izuku frowned a little, and Katsuki knew he'd thought of something that he didn't want to trouble the blonde with. But any trouble between the two of them was most likely Katsuki's doing, so he was gonna put whatever it was to rest. "What's up, Deku?" he asked, sounding softer than he'd meant to. "Nothing," Deku smiled shyly, shifting his gaze to his drink. "It's not nothing, Deku, then out with it already, I'm not gonna blow up." The blonde flashed a toothy playful grin to lighten the mood, making Izuku chuckle and helping him find the confidence he needed to answer. "It's just, I've been meaning to ask. About your girlfriend. When did you two become a thing? I mean, we're with each other nearly all the time and I didn't know." "Well, you didn't tell me. Why is that?" Katsuki raised his eyebrows, his lips parting a little as he held in a small gasp. For some reason he didn't expect the nerd to ask this, but he guessed now was as good a time as any to explain this SHT. In fact, clearing up any misunderstandings in this department would definitely be better before he confessed to the nerd. He imagined it. "Hey, Deku, I love you, but just ignore my F-boy, yeah." The thought made Katsuki frown, looking down at his coffee. His prolonged silence, plus his expression, clearly freaked Deku the F out as he tried to backtrack. Sorry Kaken. If you don't want to tell me, that's totally fine. It's your business, nobody else's." He wittered nervously. "Don't apologize, Deku. Honestly, you deserve the truth. Not to mention my public image directly impacts yours. You're my partner, I owe you the facts at least," he sighed, running a hand through his blonde spikes. He brought his hands up around his coffee cup and steadied himself. He had to tell the nerd enough to make him secure in the knowledge that not only did the SHT he'd done mean nothing to him, but he was through with acting that way. He just couldn't go the whole hog and confess, not yet. He had a plan. So he decided he had to lay himself as bare as he could before Deku on this topic, and hope he'd understand. Izuku sat patiently, his face calm and waiting, clearly showing that he knew this was hard for the explosive hero to discuss. After all, Katsuki didn't talk about any vulnerable personal SHT with anyone, and he was about to talk about it with the greenette. Deku took a little pride in that and leaned forward to show he was listening. "I'm not sure where the F to start really. So, I guess first of all, believe me when I say I don't have a girlfriend. I'm not in a relationship with anyone. Never have been. PRD. Deku nodded slightly, trailing his fingers up and down his glass, never taking his eyes off Katsuki. Red eyes met Izuku's deep green gaze and he carried on speaking. "Look, you're probably gonna think less of me after I tell you this, but..." Katsuki hesitated a moment and then internally scolded himself. "You're Katsuki Bakugou. You're afraid of nothing. I blow off steam by going out and picking up chicks." Deku's eyes widened only a little. After all, he wasn't blind, he'd seen the headlines and the photos, he knew some of it had to be true, but he still felt weird hearing his friend admit it. Not to mention disappointed, hurt, jealous. But he'd never show any of that. Katsuki, on the other hand, had a scowl on his face. He wasn't exactly proud of his behavior. Plus, he'd left out the fact that he was blowing off steam from the hot as F lustful thoughts he'd had about the gorgeous broccoli boy sitting across from him. "It all started a couple years ago. I just needed a release, and I realized I'm pro-hero dynamite. People throw themselves at me every day. That SHT is annoying, honestly." He took a drink from his coffee, which was beginning to get cold, and looked out of the window as he spoke. "I know it's shitty, and I'm using people for my own ends, but it's all science and no one gets hurt. Except maybe I've been hurting you this whole time. So, every couple months or so I go out and get shit-faced, and go home with someone." He decided to tell Deku his rules too. With a blush creeping up his face, he looked Deku in the eyes. And for the record, I've never brought any of them to my place. That'd be a stupid thing move for a pro hero. He swallowed, biting back on how cringy his next words were. And the media don't know 𝐒𝐻𝑇 anyway, 'cause I've never fed anyone. Now it was Izuku's turn to blush, a soft pink spreading out over his face. Oh, I for sure thought 𝐒𝐽𝐾𝐴𝐾 would have done that by now. I didn't mean to presume, but why you have a lot of suitors, why no? He stuttered, green eyes looking anywhere but at Katsuki. Nope. I decided I wouldn't do that 𝐻𝑇. I made that choice a long time ago. I've got my reasons. He shrugged. Katsuki couldn't give up the reason right now, even as much as he wanted to confess right then and tell the nerd he saved himself for him. Instead, he swallowed the words and pushed on, with Deku nodding sheepishly and trying to bring his eyes back to the blonde's face. Anyway, I'm a selfish prick. I let them do stuff for me and I think split. I never return the favor. And if I'm being totally honest, I'm pretty sure chicks don't really do it for me. Now Izuku was beet red, face suddenly on fire at Katsuki's way too casual coming out. What kaken are you? Well, I shouldn't assume. Sorry for interrupting. Deku waved his hands in apology, flustered beyond words. Don't look so shocked, nerd. I've been reading up on this 𝐻𝑇 actually, and I think I might be bisexual I guess, but leaning towards guys as my preference. Katsuki caught himself before he said demisexual, because he would have let the cat out of the bag if Deku asked what that meant. Ultimately Katsuki knew one truth. He had only ever been romantically or sexually interested in Izuku. Fact. The other extras were a distraction, a means to an end. 8. That's great, Kaken. I know. Everyone will be very supportive if you decide to tell them. Deku said, swapping his surprised face for his best reassuring smile. If you don't mind, can I ask a personal question? He scratched the back of his neck nervously. 1. Kuruski pedabrow, go ahead shitnerd. 2. Don't answer if you don't wanna, but... Well, if you have a preference for guys, why do you only go home with women? Because I want to make sure the extras are as different from you as humanly possible. Because no one could even compare. 1. Guess I didn't want my sexuality to be the talk of every news outlet. I mean, I knew I'd get spotted pulling this essay, so maybe I was just minimizing the fallout, Katsuki replied, not really lying. He didn't want that aspect of his life questioned by the press when he'd taken so long to accept his own sexuality. Even if he was only gay for Deku. If it was Deku on his arm it would be different. He'd want everyone to know the nerd was his, and he was the nerd's. He'd rub it in every effer's face that he loved him, and was loved by him. I guess that does make sense, Kaken. I'm sorry you feel you have to hide that part of yourself, but I understand why you're worried about keeping that private. Deku said, fidgeting with his hands. Anyway, I've decided that phase of my life is over, Deku. The next time I do that 𝐻𝑇 it's gonna be with someone I actually wanna be with. Katsuki resisted the urge to smile broadly over at the greenette, as he covertly admitted what he wanted with the nerd right to his appealing face. 1. That's great to hear, Kaken. I hope you find that someone soon, and you can be your true self and be happy. And of course they'll have to be the best for Kaken. 2. Izuku was smiling, but Katsuki could have sworn he saw a hint of sadness in that smile. The cutie had no idea how much Katsuki wanted to shout that he'd already found that someone right here. Someone who was already the best. The only person who'd ever been ahead of him. But he wouldn't have to wait much longer to tell him all that. 2. Hey nerd, he decided to grab the bull by the horns and take the opportunity while they were on the subject. What about you? You had any relationships I don't know about? He almost didn't want to know the answer because the idea of Izuku letting someone else touch him made Katsuki's skin crawl, his mouth go dry, and his fists ball up on the table with the urge to blow everything the F up. This is embarrassing. Deku cut off his own flustered muttering, hiding his face in his hands. With a big but sigh, he dropped his hands to his lap and stared down at the really interesting white tablecloth. Well, since Kaken has been so honest, he reached out and played with his now empty glass. I have never done anything we know. SXL. He whispered the last word, turning a shade of red that would rival Kiri's hair. 1. I've made out with a few people, mostly strangers on drunk nights out. I guess it's liquid courage, he chuckled nervously, except for Shinsu, we made out one time after Yue, but both of us felt really weird about it and we decided never to do it again. 6. Katsuki was clenching his jaw so hard at this news that he felt his teeth might crack under the pressure. He may also have been about 20 seconds away from accidentally burning a hole in the tabletop, so he moved to sip his now cold coffee, closing his eyes to calm himself. He was really gonna have fing words with that ugly brain F when he saw him. The strangers Deku had made out with, he also wanted to hunt down and blow their fing faces off. However, on the upside, Deku was still an innocent cinnamon roll when it came to SXL acts. So, that meant Katsuki had a shot at being his first for everything. Well, except his 𝗵𝗵𝗲 first kiss. And now he was realizing pretty suddenly that Deku has kissed Shinsu. A guy. Internally, he was overjoyed. He knew his chances had to have increased, right? However, it wasn't lost on Katsuki that he didn't have a right to feel possessive of the nerd, especially when he went around face-fucking women, even if he was imagining green eyes staring back up at him, but he was still pretty fing happy about Deku's intact purity. So you're gay or? Katsuki piped up, just wanting to be clear about who he'd have to tell to back the F off when Deku was officially his. Although he reasoned he'd likely still warn everything one. Why, I'm gay. Deku looked down, running his hand through those bouncy green curls of his. To be honest, kissing Shin kinda made me realize that fact. Before that I thought some girls were cute I guess, but I never really felt anything more than that. And, yeah, Shin and I definitely had no romantic spark at all. Like none. But kissing a guy just seemed. Right, why no? 2. Katsuki nodded, his eyes brightening. 𝗵𝗵𝗲, shitty hair had been right about Deku's sexuality too, go figure. He also guessed he kinda had the purple-haired insomniac to thank for the nerd's SXL awakening. From all the sideways glances in the locker room over the years, to the greenette checking him out in the car today, it was safe for Katsuki to now assume that Deku at least thought he was attractive. Katsuki obviously thought there was no way anyone in their right mind couldn't see he was sec on fing legs, but honestly, Crimson Eyes had witnessed the way people checked out the nerd too. The number one hero was fing oblivious to how many people wanted to F him. It was a nuisance to Katsuki for sure, because somehow this shithead could be both fing adorable and hot as F. He just appealed to everyone, and Katsuki had gotten used to subtly diverting admirers over the years, with whispered threats and small acts of violence. Just enough to scare them off, without Deku noticing of course. And no, he wasn't fing sorry about it. Not one bit. That's good dude. I'm glad you know who you are and what you want, nerd. You've always been good at knowing what you want, and striving to get it. Katsuki gave him a rare genuine smile that was soft and lit up his handsome face. Thanks Kaken. Deku shuffled in his seat. I'm really glad we talked about these things. I feel even closer to you now. I'm only sad we didn't open up to each other sooner. He smiled, laughing softly. Katsuki joined him, chuckling breathily, yeah, me too, nerd. He looked at his watch, before pushing his chair back from the table. I'm gonna settle the bill and we should get going. It's late as F and we gotta work tomorrow. You gotta let me pay my share Kaken. Here let me dish. Katsuki narrowed his eyes at the Izuku, who was digging into his trouser pocket for his wallet, and fixed him with a stern gaze. No way Deku. I'm paying, and I'm not fing arguing with you about it. Oh okay Kaken. If you insist. Thank you so much. 11. When they finally got back to Deku's building, the greenette opened the car door to leave, giving Katsuki a broad toothy grin. Plus, I really had a great night tonight, thanks Kaken. He turned to leave the car and paused, looking back over his shoulder. I'd do it more often, okay? He didn't wait for a reply, instead he slammed the door closed and practically ran into the building. 2. Katsuki watched him leave before putting the car into gear. The nerd wants to do this SHT again. F yeah. Just gotta make it through the week Katsuki, you can do this. Move beach, get out the way 7. That night, after his meal out with Deku, Katsuki had allowed himself to dream about green hair and pale freckled skin in the comfort of his own bed. Tonight's fantasy called upon the zest-off Deku that Katsuki had seen the other night. Obviously erasing eyebags from the scene, Katsuki could imagine a very angry Deku telling him he was acting unfairly, and in his sinful mind, that he needed to be punished. Katsuki is almost certain he's a dominating top, but something about Deku taking charge once in a while really got him going. It was that fiery determination that Deku always showed in battle, that was the look that Katsuki imagined would be on Izuku's appealing face as he took charge as a hot power bottom, wearing nothing except a victorious grin, as he rode Katsuki like he was just an object made for the 𝗓𝗓𝗏's pleasure. As Katsuki was breathing in the dark, and stroking himself to completion, he was vaguely aware that sometime soon he may not be having to imagine scenarios of this nature. He might be actually living them. And to top it all off, if all went to plan, unlike tonight, he'd actually get cuddles afterwards. Imagining curling up next to Izuku, holding him flush against his body, Katsuki slipped into a deep comforting sleep with cum on his sheets and nothing but the 𝗓𝗓𝗏 on his mind. The rest of the week was dragging if he was honest. He and Deku had been apart for most of their working hours, as Izuku had been asked to present training sessions at UA while Katsuki agreed to continue their patrol routes. It scared, but they were texting way more than usual, and at every free opportunity Katsuki would let the gorgeous green hero know he was thinking of him. By the time Wednesday came around, Katsuki decided it was time to casually sow the seeds for Friday's plan. 12:02 p.m. How's the training going, nerd? Deku green heart. 12:05 p.m. Great kaken. Smiling face with open mouth. There are some amazing quirks in this year's class. I can't wait to tell you all about them later. Deku green heart. 12:05 p.m. I had to bring a new notebook for all the awesome info I'm getting. 5 Katsuki chuckled to himself. TCH, same old Deku. He tried to now casually steer the conversation, and realized he could possibly get to spend some time with Izuku before Friday. 12:06 p.m. Only you would get excited over this SHT. What you doing after work? Deku green heart. 12:08 p.m. Nothing planned actually. Why? Thinking face. 12:08 p.m. Our publicist called yesterday. Said one of us has to attend some hero social tonight. Nothing too crazy but would be little less painful if we went together. 12:08 p.m. She said some SHT about discovering new talent or some CRP. Deku green heart. 12:11 p.m. That sounds like fun. Plus there might be pros there. I've not met before. Person with praying hands. Thanks for asking me, kaken. Hugging face. 12:11 p.m. Don't thank me, nerd, it's just work. It's smart casual. Pick you up at 6 so you better leave work on time. 12:12 p.m. And eat before we go, you little Deku green heart. 12:18 p.m. Okay, yes sir, Lord explosion murder. Smiling face with open mouth and smiling eyes. 12:19 p.m. Cheeky F. Getting too sassy for your own good. Deku 12:19 p.m. What about Friday night, nerd? You free? The squads are getting together so your thing coming out. If I gotta go, you gotta go. 3 Deku green heart. 12:24 p.m. Where everyone can get together. Impressive. I'll be there. I miss seeing everyone. 12:25 p.m. Good. See you later. 12:25 p.m. Don't be late. 1 Katsuki smirked to himself before sliding his phone back into his briefs pocket and shoving the remainder of his lunch into his mouth. The nerd was excited to hang out with him, and that could only be a good sign. Katsuki and Deku turned up to the event fashionably late, thanks to Deku. Apparently he couldn't decide what smart casual meant and told Katsuki he'd had to change 3 times already, to which the blonde had replied, "You look good shitnerd, stop worrying," and caused a blush to spread across Deku's freckled cheeks. The event was ram-packed with pros from all over Japan, as well as some international heroes and up-and-coming interns. Their agency, and their publicist, had provided the duo with a list of names of interest, people they were supposed to talk to and gauge their interest in team-ups, as well as whether they would be a good fit for joining their agency. Kaken, I think we'll get through the list faster if we split up. Deku mused, raising his hand to his chin in thought. Ha! You wanna get away from me that bad, he nerd? Katsuki teased, raising a blonde brow. The brunette shook his head, waving his arms at his partner. Of course not, kaken. But the quicker we do this, the quicker we can just hang out. There was that pink flush again, the one Katsuki loved, and he let his red eyes trail down Izuku's smooth skin and the red blazer he'd thrown over his tight white t-shirt. His eyes traced down to the outline of Deku's abs, liking his lips slightly, before snapping his eyes away to look at the crowd. Yeah sure. Let's get this thing over with. I'll take the first half of the list. Move your butt Deku. With that they split up, moving out into the crowd. Over an hour later Katsuki had barely gotten a glimpse of Deku in the crowd as he wandered around looking for the final name on his list. On his rounds, a label had been slapped on his black jacket tie read, "Hello, I'm Dynamite," the dynamite being scrawled in Katsuki's handwriting with thick black marker. "TCH, as if they didn't know who I am. Thing laughable." After another lap of the floor, and not spotting 𝗧𝗧𝗏, whoever the F that was, Katsuki opted to hit the bar and wait for Deku to finish his half of the list. He could have one drink, and he needed it. He ordered a scotch, neat, and propped himself against the bar eyeing the surrounding area for messy green curls. He felt a hand press firmly against his jeans, under his belt, where the curve of his butt met his back. He suppressed the urge to blow the extra's face off in a public setting and instead turned slowly to see an unexpected, and frankly unwelcome, face. "Hey cat. Long time no see. You've not been avoiding me, right, baby?" Honey eyes in a soft face smiled confidently up at him. "Cammy." Katsuki groaned, shaking himself free of her and turning back towards the bar. She moved up next to him, close enough that her BRSTs were pressing against his arm, and leaned into his field of view. "Oh come on hot stuff. Don't be like that. You probably lost my number, right? Don't worry, we can soon fix that," she purred, running a long nail-polished finger up the blonde's bicep and onto his shoulder. Katsuki's eye twitched as he sipped his drink to calm himself. He thought he was doing amazingly well at restraining himself right about now. There was no way he could blow this beach up at a business event. He shrugged his shoulders, trying to remove her hand. "F off, Cammy, I don't want your number." He bit out each word, lacing each syllable with as much venom as he could. This is how he learned you never, ever, go back for seconds. At a party years ago he'd made out with Cammy. He was sober and it was doing all for him, but she'd thrown herself at him ever since. Then in arguably one of the more idiotic moments in his life, at a night out for Dunceface's birthday he'd gotten drunk and caught onto the first beach who'd latched onto him. Unfortunately, this just happened to be Cammy. One thing led to another, and he'd ended up in a bathroom stall with his pee in her mouth. She'd given decent enough head, but he'd been pushing himself into her mouth imagining he was grasping soft green curls, and wishing he could look down into wide green eyes, when she pulled away with a pop and pushed him down onto the closed toilet seat. Through blurry drunken eyes and a spinning head, he'd blinked trying to clear his vision only to see her hiking up her skirt above her butt and starting to pull down her underwear. She was giggling like a child, as she struggled drunkenly to stay upright and remove her panties. "Oh no," Katsuki had barked, trying to rise from the toilet as she pushed him back down. Why going, baby?" She'd cooed. "I said no, Cammy," he'd retorted, repeating himself several times as she tried to climb onto his still exposed lap, long fingers trying to grope him and slide him back into a state of awe. Katsuki cringed at the memory, at how the unwanted contact had caused him to lose his SHT. He'd pinned her up against the cubicle wall ready to explode her to pieces, and the worst part was she'd actually enjoyed it. She'd at the contact and continued to try to run her hands over Katsuki's body, trying to push herself against him. She just wouldn't take no for an answer, and she'd got off on it. Just because Katsuki was physically large, it didn't mean he felt any less violated by the situation. He tucked his flaccid pee away pronto, and legged it out of there as if the hounds of hell were snapping at his heels. The whole ordeal had freaked him the F out, not to mention that every time he'd bum-bed into Cammy since, she'd tried to get in his breathes. On a positive note, it had made it clearer than ever to him that he was dead serious about his rules, because even drunk out of his nut he'd not wanted to do that SHT. Especially not with her. Cammy was now trailing thin fingers through the small hairs at the nape of his neck, making him shudder, and not in a good way. Her blouse was opened down to her cleavage, and she leaned close to his ear. "Come on, I've seen you all over the news with that beach of yours. Why don't you let me show you what a real woman can do?" So Cammy was jealous of a relationship he didn't have, with a girl he hadn't fed. If Katsuki hadn't already figured out how much his antics had caused more problems than they'd solved, he could definitely add another mark to the tally now. "If you don't back the F off, I'll dash," he growled low as Cammy cut him off unfazed. This speech was bold. Don't threaten me with a good time, handsome. I will ignore you so f***ing hard you will start doubting your own existence if you don't leave me the F alone, you delusional beach. 1. You're hurting my feelings, cat. The best only deserves the best, and well, look at me. So why don't you come home with me tonight? She smirked seductively. Katsuki turned towards her, pulling away from her hold, and was about to open his mouth to rip her a new one when a freckled hand came forwards next to him and lightly took hold of Kami's shoulder. Katsuki's mouth was still hanging open as Deku turned a frowning Kami around and led her away, placing an arm around her shoulder gently, before leaning in to talk closely with her. Red eyes narrowed as he strained to hear what Deku was saying. I'm pretty sure that's Kaken's way of saying no, Kami. Now, it would be unfair of me to enter into a battle of wits with an unarmed person, so I'll just say this. Don't embarrass yourself any further, he said in an angelic voice. Kaken doesn't want you, in fact I know for certain that he envies people who have the joy of never having met you, so it's best to move on, okay? 20 What the F, Kami exclaimed, more a statement than a question. Deku merely patted her shoulder and turned to make his way back to the gaping blonde who sat enthralled by the scene before him. You have a great night now, he called over his shoulder, waving slightly before he walked up to Katsuki's side, leaning back with his elbows on the bar. There was an undertone to his voice just then that Katsuki had never heard before. It was dangerous, but it wasn't the same voice he used in battle. It was almost possessive. Holy F, was Deku marking his Fing territory? Was he being protective of his Kaken? Katsuki Fing hoped so. He'd seen the protective side of the nerd before, of course, on rare occasions years ago, when incidents involving Katsuki would lead Deku to call forth a new quirk or tap into newfound strength. He'd not seen it any time recently though. And yeah, he definitely always adored Katsuki, but did he love him in that way? Love him? Katsuki's heart was roaring in his chest at the thought because evidence was starting to stack up in his favor. Swallowing hard, he downed the rest of his scotch as he eyed the brunette, who had allowed only the corners of his mouth to curve slightly as he tried to hide his delight at his severe burning of the beach harassing his partner. Color Katsuki impressed. His younger self would have lost his SHT at someone stepping in like that, and if it had been anyone other than Deku he still Fing would have. Sure, over the years the two has learned to work together, they were the wonder duo for F's sake, of course they had impeccable teamwork. But now Katsuki felt more, just more of everything for the nerd. He felt affection, pride and longing swell up his chest and try to strangle the air out of his lungs at the fact that Deku had stepped up for him outside of a battle zone. This wasn't in the heat of battle, this was personal. He reminded himself to breathe and decided to wind Deku up. What the F was that, nerd? He said, wearing his best affected expression. What dya mean, Kaken? Deku deflected, eyes looking away into the crowd as a rosy color started to creep up his cheeks. I'm not a Fing damsel in distress, Deku, I don't need Fing saving. 3 He spat the words out but they lacked any real bite, especially when compared to how he'd spoken to Kami, and the brunette could hear that in the blonde's voice. These two had nearly a lifetime's worth of experience to know each other inside and out. Aside from their romantic lives, they were pretty well clued up on one another. Sorry Kaken, but if it helps I didn't do it for you. I couldn't go having you ruin our agency's reputation by exploding the place now could I? He chuckled, crossing his arms, toned biceps flexing inside his blazer. TCH, whatever, I had my SHT under control. Sure Kaken, Deku scoffed, anyway, what was that all about? One green curious eyes met red ones, and since Katsuki does not lie, he could stay silent or he could get it over with. Since the nerd now knew about his shitty SXL encounters, it couldn't really hurt any. She's the only chick I ever made the mistake of going back to. Stupidest Fing decision ever. We made out one time way back, and she ended up skiing my PP at Dunce's birthday a couple years ago, but that was it. Haven't been near the beach since. He stood facing Deku, watching as a look of distaste flickered across his freckled face. Katsuki definitely did not imagine that. I see, I guess that could be pretty awkward here. He rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly, glancing back up at red eyes. It's just, you looked way angrier than usual Kaken. I've not seen you look that angry in a while. Did something else happen? 𝗬𝗵𝗲 this nerd for knowing me so well. Katsuki asked himself if he was ready to share this with Deku. If he did like him back, he didn't want to hurt the nerd by rubbing his SXL encounters in his face. There was also the fact that Katsuki would be letting him in on a vulnerable moment. A moment where he'd not only felt uncomfortable and out of control, but he'd also been touched without his consent. Not to mention he'd then lost his SHT and nearly assaulted someone. Could he tell that story? He rubbed his eyes, sighing, as Deku looked more and more concerned for his friend. He felt a warm, gentle hand on his shoulder, and looked up to meet kind deep green eyes and a comforting smile. It's okay, Kaken. Just know, if you want to talk about it, then I'm here, Izuku said softly, his hand lingering a little longer before pulling away. Katsuki wanted Deku to know everything about him, even the dark, shitty parts. He wanted to sit next to him when they were old men, and hear him repeat the same SHT he'd already heard 100 times before, and he wouldn't care as long as he was there. Plus, I'll tell you, Deku. Just not here. Katsuki looked around at the thinning crowd. You done? Deku shook his head. I actually have one more to find. F the list, nerd, we've done enough. We're leaving. Katsuki made to leave, expecting the nerd to argue about completing the list, but was surprised when Izuku pulled off his name tag without a word and followed the blonde out of the door. What's a little emotional baggage between friends? The car ride to Katsuki's apartment was comfortably silent, and Deku didn't question the blonde taking him back to his place. It seemed he wanted to talk and Izuku was happy to listen. In fact, he felt privileged that his oldest friend wanted to open up to him about something. They entered the apartment, removing their shoes, and Deku made for the sofa while Katsuki grabbed them both a water from the fridge. Deku had been here plenty of times, but rarely alone, and he sat statuesque until Katsuki came back and plopped himself down beside the greenette, handing him a bottle of water. They both drank their water before Katsuki sighed and leant back into the cushions, causing Deku to turn his whole body towards him and cross his legs on the sofa. I've never told anyone this, Deku, the blonde said, picking at the label on his water bottle, and I never want to talk about it again after. It stays between us. The concern on Izuku's face only deepened, as he leaned forward, nodding gently. At Dunce's birthday I was trashed. I don't even remember drinking that much, but when someone attached themselves to me, I just went with it. I didn't even know it was her at that point. He didn't even want her name in his mouth while telling this story. Anyway, we ended up in a bathroom stall, and she was. Well, you know. I'll spare you the details, nerd. Izuku scrunched his face, nodding again, signaling he was much happier without the in-depth description. You remember my rules, right? Izuku hummed in confirmation. Well, she tried to break one of them. Why was this so hard? Internally, he answered himself. Because you let someone take advantage of you, that's why. You were weak. He reminded himself of the therapy sessions, of realizing that this was not his failing but someone else's, and pushed forward. She pushed me back onto the toilet seat, and she tried to F me. She was shit-faced too. When she was trying to take off her underwear, I told her I didn't wanna F her. But she ignored me. She kept pushing me back down, and I was woozy as SHT from the booze, so my body wouldn't do what I wanted right away. My responses were slow as F. He was staring daggers into the bottle he was still holding, face twisted in anger and discomfort at the memory. Deku was listening intently, brows furrowed, eyes glassy, as he reached out and removed the bottle from Katsuki's grasp, replacing it with his own freckled hand, which the blonde took instantly. If it weren't for all the shitty feelings recounting this event had brought up, he'd be ecstatic that he was holding Izuku's hand right now. It was warm, soft and comforting, and he squeezed it slightly between his larger tanned hands. Izuku rubbed his thumb across the back of Katsuki's hand. It's okay, Kaken, I'm here. Katsuki kept his eyes on their clasped hands, breathing deeply. I kept telling her no, but she carried on trying to climb into my lap anyway. Let's just say I wasn't in the mood anymore, so she kept touching me, trying to get me going even though I'd told her no. I was uncomfortable as F and I lost my SHT, Deku. I pinned her back against the wall and I wanted to kill her, for making me feel weak and vulnerable, and because she made me lose control. You know I don't do well when I'm made to look weak. And I know I have my SHT down a lot these days, but I felt like that out of control kid all over again. Kaken. I'm so sorry that happened to you. He had tears swimming across his waterline, and Katsuki squeezed his hand tighter as their eyes met. Did you not report her for that? Tish, that has to be SXL assault, you said no. Deku asked, stuttering as he wiped his eyes with his free hand before any tears could fall. I didn't do anything. I was too embarrassed, I guess. I just about stopped myself from pummeling her face in and ran out of there. He leant forward, closing the space between him and the greenette. I kept thinking that her being drunk made her act that way, but every BSD time I've seen her since, she tries it on with me. The worst part was that when I pinned her back and threatened her, she enjoyed it. I felt powerless, and that's not a feeling I'm used to. Kotoki had really done it. He'd opened up to Izuku about something that had made him feel less of himself, less of a man, less of a hero. He could already feel the weight on his chest lifting. Telling his therapist had helped, telling Deku helped more. A slow steady stream of tears were now making their way down Izuku's face. He couldn't hold them back any longer. Oh Kaken! He breathed out, barely above a whisper. Katsuki could tell it hurt his oldest friend to know that he'd been made to feel this way. But in that moment, Katsuki was also hit with another wave of guilt as a realization hit him. Here he was complaining about this shitty experience when he'd put Izuku through both physical and mental abuse when they were younger. Yes, what he experienced was SHT, and his feelings were valid, but he could only imagine how Izuku had felt when he'd betrayed his trust and adoration for all those years. Sure, he apologized to Izuku years back and has been forgiven, but that doesn't mean he doesn't still feel guilty and wants to make amends to the man he loves. Deku. It's okay, nerd, I'm okay. You know I go to therapy, and I work through it there. It just still pisses me off is all. The blonde reached out and wiped away the fallen tears with his thumb, deliberately slowly, so that he could touch Izuku's pale freckled cheeks for as long as possible before withdrawing his hand. I learned a lot about myself from that experience, and I know I'm not weak. Just like you always say, I'm amazing, right you little A? The hot head pulled a soft playful smile onto his face, and Deku chucked under his breath before replying, that's right, Kaken is always amazing. He wiped his face again, sniffling before fixing red eyes with his own green ones, the dimmed lights of the living room reflecting gold flecks in his eyes. I understand that it's your choice to let this be Kaken, and I respect that, but as far as I'm concerned she doesn't deserve the title of hero. He sniffled sadly. But I am really happy you were able to share that with me, Kaken. Thank you for trusting me with that. He looked away, a red flush creeping up his neck, and for this whole week really. I'm really thankful to have you close. Katsuki hadn't noticed himself leaning forward, being mesmerized by green hair, green sparkling eyes, peach lips, and Izuku's smooth light voice uttering comforting words. Izuku stared at the blonde, eyes widening slightly, a glint in green eyes like tinder in a forest fire, and soon the whole forest was ablaze as determination set suddenly upon his face. Before Katsuki could register what was happening, Izuku had closed the space between them and connected their lips. Soft, warm, pillowy flesh caressing Katsuki's lips. The kiss was firm and brief, and Katsuki's eyes were blown wide in shock. He didn't kiss back, he didn't lean into it, he didn't even move a goddamn muscle. He was so taken aback, he simply froze. 13 Izuku had squeezed his eyes tightly closed the whole time, and Katsuki watched dumbstruck as he pulled away and his thick lashes fluttered open. To say he looked disappointed and embarrassed was a understatement. His whole face was a hot angry red, and tears were beginning to gather in the corners of his eyes. He jumped up from the sofa, darting for his shoes, before Katsuki could even come around from his blissed-out high, because Deku, the man he loved more than anything else in this shitty world, had just kissed him. Izuku had slipped on his shoes, and was making for the door. One Katsuki was up in a flash, seeing that the nerd was about to run away. No. He jumped over the back of the sofa, not as it's just given, and threw himself towards Deku, managing to curl tanned fingers around the green slim pale wrist. He opened his mouth to ask him where the F he thought he was running off to after doing something like that, but was suddenly thrown back across the hardwood hall floor. Catching himself on his hands and knees, the blonde skidded to a stop, looking up to see a flash of green lightning, and then Deku was gone. For he scrambled to his feet, ready to give chase when he realized a couple of things all at once. 1. The nerd just used his fin quirk to escape the blonde's hold, so he was clearly spooked as F. Which means he was most likely already halfway goddamn home by now. Yeah, it's illegal to use quirks off duty, but God knows Katsuki had broken the rules enough times. He knew if he turned up at Deku's place now the 𝗧𝗲 wouldn't let him in. Which led Katsuki to realization number 2, no wonder the nerd had legged it. Pro hero Dynamite, his partner, ex-bully, and oldest friend, had absolutely no fing reaction whatsoever when the poor freckled man had put himself out there and took the risk of kissing the hothead. He'd finally got something he'd always wanted with the nerd, but he'd been so stunned by his actions that he'd failed to react. Of course Deku panicked. The poor guy probably thought he'd read the signals all wrong and wanted to get away from everything and everyone as quickly as possible. Katsuki cursed under his breath several times. Okay, more than several times, closing and locking his front door, before swiping up his phone from where it lay on the sofa. He didn't want to confess by text, no fing way, but he had to say something to the poor nerd who he knew without a doubt would be a crying mess right now. 9:46 p.m. Deku, we need to talk. I'll see you at work tomorrow. 9:47 p.m. I really need to talk to you, so please don't be freaking out. 9:47 p.m. See you then, nerd. Good night. He smacked his phone against his forehead, grunting out an annoyed sigh as he resisted spilling his guts to the nerd in the world's longest text message. As if he had let the little SHT slip through his fingers. Literally. His lips had been soft and inviting, and if he'd only reacted instead of freezing like a deer in fing headlights, he could have had the nerd curled up in his arms right now. He'd just waited for that moment so long, and never in any of his imagined scenarios had it been Izuku who'd made the first move. Never. And now Katsuki had fed it up for the both of them. 3. Well, the shitnerd couldn't avoid him at work tomorrow. Not for the whole day anyway. Checking their schedule on his phone, he saw they had a 9 a.m. briefing together before Deku went off to his last lot of UA training sessions. Perfect, somehow he'd need to let the nerd know it was okay, that he was happy about it, while saving his emotional monologue and the 3 little words, 8 fing letters, for Friday night. He had a whole thing planned. He could do this. 1. He stomped to his bedroom. He knew he wouldn't get much sleep, but he needed to try. Plus a genuine smile crept across Katsuki's face in the dark, because despite how the night ended, the nerd had fing kissed him. 3. This is gonna be the best fing confession ever. Only the best for Deku. You better be ready, nerd. 1. Thank F for Todoroki. 3. Katsuki was right, he barely slept a fing wink. Today was gonna be a long day. Once he was up and dressed with a strong bitter coffee in his hand, he rang shitty hair. Firstly, he filled him in on last night's events, embarrassed at how badly he'd fed up his opportunity. Demon Cat, I bet Mido is a wreck. It's good you texted him though, bro, and honestly now tonight will be even more perfect. He's gonna be so surprised. He could practically hear the glee in Kiri's voice. He moved on to discussing the plan for tonight. It turned out Mina was off all day, so she was gonna be his point man for enacting his plan and making the necessary preparations. Don't worry, bro, Mina is a huge romantic at heart, and she knows exactly what you want. She'll be headed to the bar around lunch to set up everything. She won't let you down, bro. Katsuki thanked shitty hair. Yes, he fing thanked someone, threw on his jacket and boots, and grabbed his helmet from the hall. Today felt like a day to take the bike out and blow off some stress on his way to work. 1. The sky was a perfect clear blue, the morning air cool and brisk, but the sun was warm. Katsuki breathed in the fresh air before pulling on his helmet, starting his bike, and speeding off. He was early to the office. Not unusual for him. What was unusual was that the nerd wasn't sitting at his desk when he got there. His jacket and bag weren't there either. Katsuki frowned, his brows furrowing. He checked his phone, 8:31 a.m. Yep, the nerd should be here by now. Maybe yesterday's events had made the nerd a little nervous to face the blonde alone. Katsuki should have known the shitnerd wouldn't make this easy. So Katsuki dropped his stuff at his desk and began to wander around the building, checking the kitchen, the staff room, the bathrooms, until he circled back to their office, still finding it empty. 8:42 a.m. No way the nerd would ever be late for a meeting. He made his way to the conference room at the end of the hall. When he opened the door, to his disappointment, he didn't find the freckled face of his partner, but the blank expression of 𝗵𝗃𝗵𝗲, who was already seated at the table. "Bakugou, you're early. Looking for something?" he said flatly. Katsuki eyed him. "As a matter of fact, I am, Halfie. You seen the nerd this morning?" "Oh, Midoriya didn't tell you?" he asked, raising a brow. Katsuki saw the corners of his mouth twitch. This 𝗧𝗧 is enjoying knowing something I don't. Too, obviously thing not dips hit, or I wouldn't be thing asking. "What do you know?" he asked, crossing his arms ready for some shitty back and forth with the 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏. 2. He's taken a personal day. He's still on call for emergencies, of course, but he had a thing. 1. His monotonous voice grated on Katsuki's every nerve, not to mention what the F was with his vague answer. He had a thing. "What thing?" "I need to talk to the little 𝗧𝗧." Sarcasm dripped from the word thing, as he dropped into the seat opposite Todoroki. "Will he be still coming out tonight?" "I doubt it," Todoroki replied, eyeing him with an annoyingly knowing look. Katsuki's heart dropped. All this would be for nothing if he didn't get the nerd there. It was looking like he really was gonna have to invade the shithead's apartment just to confess. Or stage a high-level villain attack to lure him out. Okay, that might be going too far. Maybe he could get 𝗬𝗏𝗏 to help convince him. This thought alone clouded Katsuki's handsome features with a deep scowl, because he really didn't wanna ask this F-word for help. Before he could dwell on it any further, Todoroki interrupted his musing. "What did you need to talk to him about?" "Anything I can help with." His face was as blank as ever, but at this point Katsuki thought he better grab the open invitation and reluctantly seek his help before he could think too much about it and PSS himself off. "Listen, BSC, I'm only answering your thing questions for Deku. And the meeting's gonna start soon, so we better be quick." Todoroki nodded. That was the extent of his movement. He was as animated as ever. Katsuki swallowed his pride. He swallowed it hard, nearly retching on it as it lodged in his throat before he forced the 𝗧𝗧 down. "I wanna tell Deku I love him. I don't know how much shitty hair told you, but I have a whole thing planned tonight. But I fed it up before I even thing began, 'cause Deku kissed me last night and I thing froze.' That's the short but version. Questions?" The blonde explained quickly. "No questions." Todoroki had a small smile on his lips, making Katsuki PP a brow in his direction, feeling cessed that it seemed the 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏 was mocking him. Not wanting to let the situation get out of hand, Todoroki decided to let him in on what he knew. "Look, it's not really my place, but at this point we've watched you two dance around this for too long," he sighed. "Too here." Katsuki snapped. "The candy cane 𝗧𝗧 better start making some real DMN sense soon. Midoriya has liked you for the longest time, Bakugou. We all tried to convince him to talk to you about it, but he kept saying he was just happy that you were friends again and achieved your dreams together. He said he didn't want to be rejected and ruin your partnership. He thought there was no possible way you could love him at all, and definitely not romantically. Seeing you in the headlines every few months didn't help our case when we tried to tell him that you likely reciprocate his feelings." Katsuki sat, jaw clenched tightly shut, because he refused to wear the gleeful expression that wanted to spread across his face in front of this 𝗧𝗧. "When Kirishima contacted us, both squads finally knew that you both felt the same way, that you both had a chance at being happy together. We all respected your respective privacies and kept your feelings amongst our own groups until last week, and after talking it out we all ultimately decided you both needed to confess on your own accord. Hence, why we were all so thrilled to help you out tonight." Katsuki was leaning forward across the table, teeth aching as he bared down on them. Must not smile in front of this candy cane piece of SHT. His heart was beating so fast it may as well be writing a raging new dubstep track on his ribs. This SHT was everything he needed to hear. He was beside himself. He just had to hold it together. That's why, as soon as I leave this meeting, I'll be contacting Midoriya." The hothead's face reacted before he could catch it. His eyebrows shot upward, mouth dropping open in both confusion and shock. "Don't worry, Bakugou. He will be at that party. You have my word. 9. Why the F would you do that for me? He said, pointing between the two of them, and quickly returning to his default scowl. Todoroki shook his head. I'm not doing it for you, Bakugou. I'm doing it for Midoriya. You may not be my favorite person, but for some reason he wants you. You, of all people. He sighed and rolled his eyes. Sassy F, he's my best friend, I just want him to be happy. Katsuki breathed through his nose to calm himself down, trying to regulate his heartbeat as he wiped his now sweaty palms on his jeans. His face softened a little as he thought about how much the nerd was truly loved by everyone around him. The fact Todoroki and Katsuki had managed to hold an actual conversation proved they both cared deeply for him. Katsuki guessed he was supposed to say thank you, but the word burned his tongue when he looked at those heterochromatic eyes. You're very welcome, Bakugou. Todoroki smirked. 3. Katsuki let out a relieved sigh, nodding at him to show his appreciation. Hey, it was as good as it was gonna get. The nerd would be proud of them. After a few moments they could hear voices out in the corridor. A thought suddenly came to Katsuki. He couldn't help but ask, Oi, what did you whisper to Deku the other week, you know, in our office? He was upset by your antics the night before. I told him it was evidence in his favor. He wasn't having it. Todoroki smiled slightly, shaking his head, shoulders moving the tiniest amount in silent laughter. Katsuki's eyes narrowed. I whispered watch his reaction when I get close like this, he smirked. I thought I proved my point. 10. This sassy half and half F you little dash, good morning y'all. Burnin announced as she strode into the meeting room. She eyed the pair. Whoa, weird energy in here. 4. No more distractions. 6. Katsuki was pacing his apartment. Ever since he got home, he'd been a nervous wreck. He'd busied himself getting ready for tonight. He'd done SHT for tonight that honestly was not even necessary. The face mask, the brand new clothes, the 2 extra layers of deodorant. The frankly excessive amount male grooming. No way they were going that far tonight, but he was nervous and fussing over the littlest things. He would be setting off soon to make sure he got there before the nerd, and to see the setup he'd entrusted to Pinky. He slapped his own cheeks, a little too hard, and stared himself down in the mirror. He could do this. Deku just needed to be there. Icehot was a lot of things, but he was no quitter, and despite his previous lack of trust in Todoroki's behavior around Deku, he had to admit he trusted the F.R. in every other aspect. He might not like him that much, but he respected him. He'd get Deku there, he trusted him with that. Katsuki ran a hand through his ash-blonde spikes, letting out a long breath as he adjusted and fastened his suit jacket. He'd pair a tailored black suit with a black dress shirt and shoes. It was simple enough, but he looked good. Everyone else at the gathering would be dressed casually, but Katsuki had someone to impress. 3. His phone vibrated notifying him that his town car was out front, and he grabbed his essentials before heading out. The bar he was heading to was one of the pro heroes' regular haunts. It was mostly pros who hung out there as the owner was great about keeping out the media and had always been discreet about anything that went on inside. Honestly, it was kind of a safe haven for a lot of the heroes and support staff, somewhere they didn't have to be bothered. Katsuki had called the owner and asked to hire out the upstairs bar. The owner didn't treat Katsuki like a hero, he just treated him like any other guy, and the explosive blonde appreciated that. So, that was the setting. Kind of. Soon Katsuki was thanking the driver and heading inside the bar, waving or nodding to a few of the pros, sidekicks, and support staff he recognized before heading straight for the stairs. He pushed open the door to the upstairs bar, which had a no-access, private event sign on the door, and was happy to see nearly everyone already there. Of course all of the Baku squad were there, as well as Deku's friends Pink Cheeks, Glasses, and the Frog. No Deku or Icehot yet, and Katsuki hoped that was a good sign. Katsuki wanted to make a beeline straight for the door to the balcony, but didn't make it one step into the room before an idiot WS accosting him. Baku bro. Looking fine AF. Dimon, if Mido doesn't take you home tonight, I will. Denki teased, winking at the blonde playfully while trying to drape an arm around his shoulders. 8. Katsuki brushed him away. F off dunce. The blonde paused. Wait, aren't you hooking up with ears? Gyro was over by the bar talking with Pink Cheeks, as Denki flushed pink a little. Dude. Keep it down, man. We've only just started dating, bro, nothing else has happened, he hissed, whisper yelling at the number 2 hero. Or, bro, she's still not giving it up, here. 𝗧𝗏 laughed, nudging Denki as he came over to join the pair. Denki rolled his eyes. Shut up, 𝗧𝗏, at least I'm dating someone. Denks, that's not manly, bro, Kiri sidled up to Katsuki, laughing as he patted 𝗧𝗏's shoulder in mock comfort. So, how are feeling, Baku bro? Shitty Hair asked, handing Katsuki a bottle of beer, which he took with a nod of thanks. How the F do you think I'm feeling? He scowled. Whoa. Is our fearless leader actually nervous about something? Dunt's face laughed. Kiri gave him a look that said, Denks, do you want to die today? And his laughter died down. Look man, it's Midoriya. Even if he did hate your guts, which we obviously know now that you've spoken to Todo that he doesn't, it'd be like the gentlest rejection anyone ever made, 𝗧𝗏 said, smiling broadly, the guy's just too good for this world. Yeah, he's too sweet. Not to mention fine as F. Denki was cut off by a large tanned hand smacking him upside the head. He had been hit around the head a lot over the years by a certain explosive hero, but that didn't mean that it hurt any less, and this time was no exception. He rubbed his head begrudgingly, muttering an "it's true though" under his breath, to which he received the patented Bakugou glare. For keep your eyes on 𝐒𝐬𝐽𝐽𝐻. Just 'cause you're out as by now doesn't mean you get to If Deku. Katsuki fixed him with one last chilling stare before turning back to the others. So, you are nervous? Kiri asked, smiling comfortingly at the blonde. That's totally normal when doing something like this, bro. And it's super manly. He eyed Mina from across the room. When I told Mina I liked her, I was a mess, man, but I just pulled myself together and did it, and now look at us. His smile flooded his whole face, his eyes lighting up. Yeah, I think get it, shitty hair. Katsuki groaned. I get that I pretty much know the nerd feels some kinda way about me, but I might have scared him off. And we'll be changing our whole thing dynamic. There's a lot to consider between us, Baku, don't overthink it. You and Midoriya can talk that all out after. But honestly, if he loves you too, bro, you guys will figure everything else out. 𝗧𝗏 chimed in. He signed and ran a hand down his face, taking a large swig of his beer. When the F did you become a relationship guru? Soy sauce you third-wheeling at? Whoa, harsh bro, Denki cried, throwing an arm around 𝗧𝗏, who feigned offense. I just wanna get this over with. Icy hot better get him here or I swear I'm gonna murder. The effer, he took a final draught of his beer, setting it down on a nearby table. Right, I need to see what Raccoon Eyes has done. Oh bro, you aren't gonna be disappointed. Trust me. Kiri beamed. Bakugou made to walk away but large hands held him back. Bro, I promised my girl she could show you her work. Shitty Hair said, blinking a little too much, knowing this was gonna annoy his blonde friend who just wanted to get out there and see it already. Come on bro. She worked really HRD on this for you. Katsuki sighed, shrugging Kiri off. Fine, hurry the F up, he could be here any minute. Babe. Come on. Kiri shouted over to Mina, who was chatting up a storm with 𝗬 and Ida. And Todo's gonna text you when he's on his way, bro, don't sweat it. Mina squealed as she ran over to the boys. Eek, I'm so excited to show you Baku babe. She landed a peck on Kiri's lips before grabbing Katsuki's hand and dragging him towards the wooden balcony doors. Katsuki was not thrilled about being dragged along, but he'd learned over the years that when it came to Pinky, the less he struggled, the quicker it was over. Ready? She asked, bouncing on her toes like a child waiting for presents. He rolled his eyes at her, and nodded. She let out a few more excited squeals as she moved behind him and pushed him through the doors. The balcony area had been cleared of furniture and the whole of the patio floor was strewn with orange rose petals. There were strings of warm golden fairy lights strung across the railings and criss-crossing over their heads, twinkling against the slowly darkening spring sky. Large pillar candles were set around the floor at the edge of the railings, and the flames flickered in the slight breeze. Katsuki couldn't lie, it looked fing amazing. To be honest, it looked too good. Oi, Pinky, don't get me wrong, it looks fing great, but he's gonna think I'm fing proposing with all this, Katsuki bit out, hiding his panic behind an angry front. He didn't want to freak the nerd out. Or worse, set his expectations too high. Who was he kidding? He knows he's a thing catch, but so is Deku, and this had to be perfect. He was starting to worry that this was all too much for a confession. Mina wrapped an arm around his shoulder and hugged him into her side, sensing his internal freakout. When he didn't push her away, she definitely knew that this was Bakugou losing his 𝐒𝐻𝐻𝗔𝗓. Listen to me, Mina said, looking up to him and meeting his gaze. Midoriya is a hot AF, absolutely adorable cinnamon roll, but he is also completely, hopelessly, dense. 5 Oi. Watch it, raccoon eyes. Katsuki growled, merely causing Mina to chuckle. My point is, he will not see this coming at all. The thought of a proposal will not even cross his oblivious mind. He'll be so shocked that Denki may have to be on standby to defibrillate the poor broccoli boy. She laughed again. So yes, is it OTT for a confession? Yes. But does it need to be way obvious for our gorgeous Deku to get it? Hell yes. 4 plus he deserves it, right? She grinned, squeezing Katsuki. Thing too right. He smirked, convinced. He reached over, placed his palm on Mina's face and pushed her away, chuckling. That's more like our Bakubabe, she signed dreamily, watching Katsuki wander towards the railing. He'd wanted to do this on a roof with a view. For some unknown reason, he and Deku had just had too many meaningful encounters in settings like this. Not to mention the long nights on patrol spent atop buildings in each other's company, when the streets were quiet and peaceful, allowing for lingering glances and unspoken words to burn on the tip of Katsuki's tongue. Not after tonight. Hopefully I won't have to hold back anymore. It was strange to think that he might not have to hide this anymore, that he might not have to distract himself from his own desires, that he might be able to call the nerd his. His phone vibrated in his jacket pocket and he pulled it out with butterflies erupting in his stomach as Mina moved up next to him. She peered over at this phone. Icy hot, 7:36 p.m. We're on our way. ETA 20 minutes. Mina screamed, jumping up and down. It's finally happening. Katsuki shot back a quick OK text, before turning his phone on to Do Not Disturb and slipping it back into his pocket. No more distractions. Let's do this after 20 minutes, Pinky. You extras know what to do. Mina nodded excitedly, running back towards the door. Katsuki heard Pinky scream, "Guys, he's coming," before the balcony door swung closed. He couldn't help but smile to himself. He and Deku really did have the best friends. He'd find some way to show them he was thankful to them that meant he didn't actually have to say thank you for all of their help. He turned back to the view, pushing his sweating hands deep into his trouser pockets and closing his eyes as he steadied himself. This was it, positive thoughts only, the nerd was coming. Izuku and Todoroki were pulling up outside the bar in Todoroki's SUV. Izuku had refused to go, telling his friend that he did not by any means want to face Kaken yet. Todoroki couldn't just let Izuku ruin Bakugou's plans, so he sighed and swallowed the truth, doing the only thing he knew would get Midoriya to go to the bar. He lied. 5 granted, it was a small lie, but he still felt somewhat bad about it. He just remained hopeful that it would all be worth it for his friend to end the night happy in the arms of the man he'd been in love with for years. Oh, well then you're coming then. Bakugou won't be there. He got called into work. Todoroki had lied. 7 Of course Midoriya had questioned why he hadn't also been called to work, problem with some urgent paperwork he filed this week. Todoroki had replied, shrugging nonchalantly. That's not like Kaken, the greenette had mused, but okay, if you're sure he won't be there I'll go get dressed. Now, they were entering the bar, with Todoroki taking Deku's hand to stop him from getting sidetracked by the others in the bar. The hero on the bar stool that Deku didn't recognize with gnarly clawed hands made him curious to know more about his quirk. Oh, Todoroki-kun, can I just dash? Sorry Midoriya, we're already late. Ida will already be waiting to lecture us. He was really racking up those lies today, wasn't he? Although he supposed the one about Ida was most likely to be true. He pulled Midoriya up the stairs, moving behind him and placing a gentle hand on his shoulder to guide him through the door first. Everyone in the room was clearly trying to act naturally. Most were succeeding, calling greetings to Midoriya. Except Denki, he rushed over to Deku, pulling him into a tight hug. Mido! It's been too long. Kiri rolled his eyes, thankful that Denki always acted like an overexcitable puppy. "Hi Kami." Deku beamed, hugging him back. "Yeah, it's been a while here. I'm just so excited we're all able to be here. Well, nearly all of us." Kirishima exchanged a look with Todoroki that said, "Ah. His sad Bakubro's not here. The plan's working." Following it up with wide eyes and stupid grin plastered on his face. "I'll just grab a drink, Kami, and say a few more hellos to people," Deku said as Denki released him from his hold. "Sure bro," Denki smiled. Deku said a few quick words to his friends on his way to the bar, and Uraraka followed him, putting on her most natural smile despite sweating buckets. She had to get Deku outside. Bakugou had entrusted them with this, and they'd all decided Izuku was most likely to believe Uraraka. "5, glad you could make it, Deku." She smiled, hugging him briefly. "Hey Yura." "Me too." He beamed. "Gosh, we've got so much to catch up on. I need to tell you what happened last night between Kaken and I." "Oh god Yura, I totally messed up." Uraraka cut him off. Todoroki had told the whole squad about Deku and Bakugou's kiss anyways, only to aid tonight's plans of course. "Deku. No freaking out at a social gathering. Especially before you've even had a drink." She laughed casually. He laughed along with her, twiddling his fingers. "I guess you're right, we've got time for my drama later." What's new with you?" Now, time for the one thing Deku couldn't resist, geeking out over quirks. "Oh, I've actually been meaning to speak to you. I think I've developed a new aspect to my quirk. I don't know how I never managed to use it before," she said, bringing a finger to her chin in thought. "Waya Uraraka. Why didn't you tell me about this immediately? What is it?" His eyes lit up in excitement. God, he better look this excited when he sees Bakugou, Uraraka thought, suppressing a laugh. "I can't really explain it very well," she pretended to look around the room. The others were now holding conversations of their own, not drawing too much attention to themselves. "Ah. I know, let's go on the balcony, I'll need room to show you. It'll be so much easier if you just see it for yourself." She shrugged and waved a hand dismissively. "Okay," he nodded enthusiastically. "Oh, this is gonna be so awesome Uraraka, I can already tell." He followed her as she walked towards the balcony doors. Deku had a strange sensation of eyes snapping to look at him as he walked past his friends, but when he looked up they all looked very deep in conversation. He shook his head to clear the feeling as Uraraka gracefully moved beside him. "Age before beauty," she said jokingly, giggling a little. Deku grinned, looking back at her and rolling his eyes while he stepped through the door. He turned his face forward and immediately gasped. "Kaken!" Katsuki was standing at the railings, facing away from him. The warm lights on the balcony sparkling against the now dying embers of the day, the horizon awash with dark bruised purples, pinks and deep oranges. Katsuki turned slowly to see Deku frozen in place, one hand still stretched out behind him holding the door open for Uraraka. Green eyes were blown wide and shimmering in the lights. His green curls shifted slightly in the cool breeze that rippled the fabric of his pastel blue t-shirt against his toned frame. Deku let his arm drop limply to his side, letting the door slam closed, much to the disappointment of everyone inside, yes even Ida, who were all curious as to how Bakugou would confess his feelings. Izuku swallowed hard, taking in his surroundings, the lights, the petals, the candles, and Katsuki who looked just as good as ever in his fitted black suit. Deku opened his mouth to speak but was almost relieved that nothing came out when Katsuki held up his hand, signaling for his partner to wait. "I know you like to talk, nerd, but I've got a whole thing planned. So just bear with me, okay? I know you'll have loads of questions, and I promise I'll answer 'em, but first just let me get through this 'cause I'm nervous as F." Deku's mouth and lips were suddenly desert dry, and he liked his lips slightly, nodding slowly while secretly pinching his own thigh hard to check that this was really happening. This setting, the blonde's attire, Kaken being nervous. Nope, never gonna happen. Can't be real. 5. He held back the urge to wince at the self-inflicted pain in his thigh. This was real. Or was it a quirk? Was he under the effects of someone's quirk? No, he'd been at home all day until Todo had arrived. Maybe he ate or drank something that influenced his perceptions. Maybe he never woke up this morning and he's in a villain's lair somewhere. Or he's dead and this is the afterlife. Maybe nerd, you're cute as F, but you're mumbling. This is Fing real Deku, trust me. Izuku hugged himself sheepishly, as he momentarily thought that would be just what a villain would say, but Katsuki looked on edge and serious, so he decided to let it go for now. Plus, his face had instantly warmed up because Kaken thought he was cute. He could go along with this for a little while, right? He nodded again. Katsuki pulled his hands from his pockets as he sighed. I'm just gonna come out and say it. I love you, Izuku Midoriya. I think I always have. It feels good to finally say it. For all the air in Izuku's lungs was instantly expelled in shock, his mouth hanging open before Katsuki even finished his sentence, his whole body flushing hot. He couldn't move or speak right. Now even if he wanted to. Now it was Katsuki's turn to look sheepish. He himself was redder than Deku had even seen him. Katsuki forced himself to look back into Deku's eyes. I know given our past that it might be hard to believe, but I realize all the SHT I put you through. He stopped himself, refocusing. Look, there's a lot to unpack there that honestly we can talk about later, but the bottom line is I took all of my insecurities and weaknesses out on you, and I warped my feeling into something hard and sharp that I tried to beat you with. 𝗬𝗲𝗄, I wish I could take all those years back. Thank God you're stubborn as F and you never gave up because of the SHT I put you through. He laughed nervously, as Izuku's eyes became glassy with unshed tears. I'm gonna tell you something fed up and embarrassing, Izuku, something only shitty hair knows. Deku nodded encouragingly. Realizing his mouth was still hanging open, he closed it, listening intently, finding himself taking a step forward. I've wanted you for years. I've wanted to hold you, touch you, kiss you. But I didn't want to ruin this, what we've worked so hard for because of some stupid thing longing. But the more I pushed it down, the more it intruded on my thing life. That's why I started going out and picking up extras. I didn't want to lose my SHT and thing jump you, because I came thing close a good few times. Deku. We spend nearly every thing day together. He glanced away ashamed, before straightening up and capturing Deku's wide eyes once more. That's why they were all women, Izuku. I needed them to be as different from you as possible, but whenever I did that SHT all I'd be thinking about was you. Just wishing it was you. You're the reason I have those 2 rules, Izuku, because some part of me always hoped I'd get my SHT together and confess. I knew I wasn't just pushing down some stupid lustful desires. I thing loved you, Izuku, and I've been hurting you by thing around and distracting myself. 2. He stepped up close to Deku, close enough to reach out a calloused hand and place it gently on a freckled cheek. Tears began to slip slowly down Izuku's pale skin and wet Katsuki's palm. I'm so thing sorry for that. For everything. I don't want to distract myself from you anymore, Izuku. Honestly, I've never been able to take my eyes off you. Even before I knew to call this feeling love, I couldn't look away from you. You've always held my attention, and I always wanted your eyes on me. You'll never be a distraction, Izuku. 12. Katsuki was caressing Izuku's cheek, both men breathing rapidly as Izuku brought a shaking hand up to fold around the larger tanned hand. Izuku closed his eyes, savoring the feeling as if Katsuki could leave or disappear any moment now. He felt warm breath on his face and opened his eyes to see Katsuki stepping closer, leaning their foreheads together. You have to know how appealing you are, Izuku. Inside and out. I mean, you're seriously thing gorgeous, and your body. Katsuki shook his head slightly as his words trailed off, biting his lip, his eyes slipping closed momentarily. Deku let out a barely audible breathy laugh, knowing that if it was possible to go any deeper a shade of red then he would have. I have to remind myself every day that standing by your side isn't a dream, it's thing real. Even though being beside you feels more like a fever dream than reality, you make me feel more. You always have, more of everything. You make me burn, Izuku, so deeply I can't even thing breath when I think of being with you. 2. If Katsuki was burning, then Izuku was melting with every new word that was said. He could feel his legs trembling beneath him as red eyes pierced into green. 1. Katsuki felt Izuku shaking and placed his large hands firmly on the other's waist, anchoring him as Katsuki moved his head away and pulled the greenette to his chest. Izuku peered up at him, tears still falling. I'll take you for Fing dates, or I'll jump right into the deep end and move in with you tomorrow if that's what you want. I'll do whatever you want, just to call you mine, because I'm already yours, Izuku. But honestly, I don't want to go slow. I've already wasted so much Fing time just being afraid. We've known each other for most of our lives. We've always been so tangled up in each other that I don't think we could pull ourselves apart even if we wanted to. For Izuku couldn't help but agree. Their lives were inextricably linked. Their stories connected like the interleaved pages of two separate books, impossible to separate, no matter how many attempts were made to pull them apart. Neither of us would be here without the other. We've fought, pushed and pulled each other forward. We're the Fing Wonder duo because you never gave up on me. Even after I hurt you, even after I took all my fears and insecurities out on you, you forgave me. You made me a better man, Izuku, a better hero. Katsuki took a deep shaky breath, and hopefully I'll have the chance to prove that to you every day for the rest of our lives as the best Fing boyfriend, and one day husband, there's ever Fing been. 7. He brought up a hand to wipe away Izuku's now slowing tears. I can't promise I'll never piss you off, because I'm absolutely Fing positive I will, but I'll never abandon you, Izuku. I'll always be here for you. No matter what. Izuku sniffled, sobbing. He knew he must look like a mess right now, but Katsuki didn't seem to care as he stroked the brunette's damp cheek. So what do you say, nerd? Do you maybe want to try this thing with me? 6. Izuku was already surging forward, his body moving on its own as he lunged, throwing his arms and legs tightly around the blonde. 1. Katsuki stumbled slightly, winded, before recovering and squeezing Deku in his arms. He let a genuine smile slip onto his face as the nerd buried his face into Katsuki's neck, now fully sobbing. The hot head rubbed his partner's back to comfort him, giving him a few moments to let it all out, soaking his black jacket in tears. Izuku. Deku. Do you think, you can maybe say something? Katsuki asked in probably the most gentle voice he'd ever used in his DMN life. Yes, Izuku's reaction seemed positive, but after everything Katsuki had just poured out of himself, he kinda needed to hear something to confirm his feelings were reciprocated. 2. Deku pulled his head back, using his t-shirt to wipe his face before replacing his hands back around Katsuki's neck. He took a few deep steadying breaths before breaking out in sweet giggles. Kaken, I love you too, you idiot. I have for ages and ages. He exclaimed, sliding his legs down the blonde's body until he was standing on his tiptoes, both men pressed tightly together. 1. Katsuki grinned broadly, thank F for that after all this Fing effort, nerd. Izuku led them into another embrace before pulling away to look into the other's face. Never answered your question, Kaken, he said, looking away shyly. Well, Katsuki said, heart beating out a rhythm the speed of as a hummingbird's wings. I'd like to try this thing with you. Please, Kaken. He laughed. Katsuki couldn't help himself. He grabbed the nerd around his waist and swung him around, spinning in a circle, like two kids at play, earning more adorable giggles from Deku. 8. When he set Izuku back down, he leaned in with the intention of kissing the little 𝐻𝐻 his waited so Fing long for. He stopped their lips mere millimeters from each other, Deku's eyes wide and expectant. Can I kiss you, nerd? Katsuki smirked against soft peach lips. Yes, Izuku breathed out, his breath fluttering over the blonde's face. Fing finally. 21. Their lips came together, and this time neither of them missed a beat. Their lips moved perfectly in time with one another, as their arms encircled the other's firm-toned bodies, pulling each other impossibly close. They both breathed heavily, neither wanting to break away, savoring the taste of each other, as lips parted and tongues danced entwining together. Time seemingly slipped away as they held each other, connected under the night sky, hearts pounding out complementary rhythms. 3. They finally pulled apart, both laughing with the giddiness of recent events. 1. Deku, you're mine now, right? And I'm yours. We're partners in every Fing way, right? Katsuki asked, quietly. 1. Of course, Kaken, he beamed, running a hand through soft blonde spikes. That's what I want more than anything. Katsuki smirked, kissing his nerd once more. We should probably head inside. We've been out here a while. Izuku giggled, reluctantly releasing the blonde. Katsuki nodded, taking the nerd's hand. I know we've still got a lot to talk about Deku, but that can wait. For now, let's enjoy the extras' faces when they see this. He nodded towards their entwined hands. Deku squeezed Katsuki's hand in his. Right, Kaken, let's go, he confirmed cheerily. Just before they got to the balcony doors, a mischievous look crossed Deku's face, and he raised the index finger of his free hand to his lips, signaling for Katsuki to remain quiet. The blonde arched his eyebrow curiously. Actually, Kaken, there is something that could stop us being together. Deku pulled his lips tightly closed to suppress a giggle, placing his free hand on the handle of the right-hand balcony door. One Katsuki smirked, reaching out his own free hand for the door handle of the left-hand balcony door. What's that, nerd? Katsuki nodded at his boyfriend. Yeah, my boyfriend, and Deku silently mouthed a countdown. 3, 2, 1. The pair pulled the doors wide open and several of their friends tumbled through the opening with 𝐤𝑳 at the head of the pack, groans and yelps emitting from the people pile-up caused by the wonder duo. Katsuki glared at them, pulling Deku into his side with an arm that had snaked around his waist, causing the 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗏 to blush. The whole party was gathered in the doorway looking at the new couple apologetically. Pink cheeks, pinky, dunce, and shitty hair all had puffy eyes or tear-streaked faces, while most of the others were beaming or smirking at them. What the F, extras? You F-ers were listening. Katsuki growled. Don't be mad bro, come on Bakugou, we had to know. You were so sweet. We're sorry but it was so appealing. They all clamored over each other, but Katsuki had his eyes fixed on 𝗔𝗓𝗓. This was you, wasn't it ears? You know that's illegal fin quirk usage. He sneered. 𝗬𝗓𝗓 fixed his scarlet gaze, completely unmoved. She turned to the others and rolled her eyes. This is on you guys. I need a drink. She huffed and went back inside towards the bar. Kaken. Deku playfully hit the larger male's chest, fingers lingering a little too long on impact, and boy did Katsuki notice, heat spreading through his core. He couldn't wait for more of that. Sorry guys, we know you were just curious, and that you all care about us. We care about you all too, a lot. And thank you, for being so supportive of us. The 𝗧𝗓𝗓 let a large genuine smile take over his face, and Katsuki couldn't help but let the corners of his lips curl upwards as he lied through his teeth. Nah, I still hate all of you shitty extras. Their friends smiled or laughed with the pair, Ida stepping forward doing his trademark chopping motions. Midoriya, Bakugou, please accept our apologies for eavesdropping. We know it's impolite, but I must admit I too was curious as to if you two were going to finally work this out. We've all been rooting for you, and may I be the first to congratulate you on becoming a couple. Babe, they just became boyfriends, they didn't get flippin' married, don't be so formal dude. Mina laughed, leaning against a beaming Kiri. Yes, it's about time, Kero. Zu added, raising her glass. We're all super stoked for you guys. Kiri said, wiping still glassy eyes as others nodded. Good, now can we go inside and get a thing drink? Katsuki said, scoffing, but giving Kiri a nod of thanks regardless. Thanks everyone. And oh, yes please Kaken. Old fashions. He said, tilting his head to look at Katsuki adorably. The blonde grinned again, nodding and placing a small kiss atop green curls. He just couldn't stop grinning when it came to the nerd. Come on Denks, let's get these men those drinks. 𝗧𝗏 cheered. That was so freaking appealing guys. Dunce called, following 𝗧𝗏 inside. The rest of the group started to follow, and Deku took one last look at the balcony area, smiling and leaning into his lifelong friend, partner, boyfriend, the love of his life. His Kaken. Katsuki meant so many things to him. He wouldn't change this for anything. When they entered the room, Shinsu had joined the group and was talking to Todoroki. Deku waved at him enthusiastically, earning a 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗔𝗓 grin from the purple-haired man. Katsuki leaned down to whisper in Izuku's ear, just give me a moment to talk to 𝐈𝐵𝐺𝐻, okay? Deku responded with a questioning look and a giggle. You have to stop calling him that, Kaken. Katsuki chuckled, kissing the nerd on the cheek and begrudgingly letting go of the hold he had on his waist. He walked directly up to Shinsu, getting very close to the freak, nearly chest to chest, and Todoroki narrowed his eyes assessing whether he was about to have to break up an altercation. Oi, but, Katsuki said under his breath, leaning in closer still to Shinsu's face. I heard you tongue-fed Izuku. 7 Shinsu was completely unfazed by the whole situation, and watched Deku shift uncomfortably in the background as he witnessed the confrontation between his boyfriend and his best friend. The brunette was clearly pretending to listen to what Mina and Uraraka were saying to him as Zero handed him his drink. Violet and Red eyes locked as Shinsu laughed slightly. That's right, hot stuff, what's wrong? Jealous that I was his first. The two were now trying to outsmirk each other. Listen here, you brainwashing freak, 'cause I'm only ever gonna say this once. Katsuki growled. He pointed a finger into Shinsu's chest, and Todoroki raised a hand between them, on guard. Thank you. Katsuki spat out. Shinsu's smirk grew, if that were even possible, and he ped his head at the blonde. If you hadn't kissed the 𝗧𝗲𝗏, he wouldn't have discovered his sexuality, or known how much of a better kisser I am than you, he scoffed. Plus, you were fing right. Green looks fantastic on me. Deep chuckles left Shinsu. Well, F me, never thought I'd see the day. 2 Don't get fing used to it, freak. Katsuki jabbed his finger harder into the other's chest, and don't you ever fing try that with Deku ever again, or I'll fing kill you. Todoroki relaxed, smiling slightly, as Katsuki dropped his hand, and Shinsu continued to smirk. No problem, handsome, but if you ever need a third pair of hands you know where to find me. He winked, causing Katsuki to roll his eyes with disgust as he walked back to Deku. 15 Katsuki stood behind Deku and captured him in his arms, laying his head on the shorter man's shoulder. Deku smiled at him, pecking his neck. What was that about, Kaken? Oh, nothing, nerd, Katsuki said, taking the drink tape arms handed him. Tell me later, okay? Deku said, and Katsuki hummed in reply, as the nerd sipped his drink and held Katsuki's arms with his own. I know we still have a lot to resolve to make this thing work, Kaken, but I'm so ready to work through it all with you. I am really heckin' happy you decided to do this. Thank you for loving me. Deku blushed, leaning into Katsuki's built chest. I should be the one thanking you for that, nerd. You've always adored me. Katsuki grinned. We'll sort the other 𝗧𝗏𝗏 out, trust me we will, 'cause I wanna get this show on the road as soon as possible without any holdups. But for now, let's just enjoy tonight, nerd. He nuzzled into his boyfriend's neck, breathing him in. Finally. Katsuki smiled to himself as Deku began chatting away to their friends. Plus this is just the thing beginning. Epilogue. The last couple of months had not been completely smooth sailing for the Wonder Duo. They talked, a lot, about the practical issues they needed to resolve. For example, did they want the world to know? Neither of them cared if the whole world knew, but they both decided they'd keep it amongst their friends and families just to enjoy their honeymoon phase before the whole world inevitably found out. They still went on dates and shopping trips, and did all the other things couples did, but they just kept the PDA on the down low when out in public settings. The tabloids hadn't seemed to pay any notice, yet, since the two were already together so much in their daily lives. When it came to work, nothing had changed. They fought side by side, just like they always had. They still always had each other's backs. If anyone had argued that they were now risking being targets as they were each other's weaknesses, well no 𝗧𝗏𝗏 Sherlock. They always had been, all the way back before Kamino Ward or the fight with Shigaraki proved it. Thankfully no one did make that argument, because Katsuki would have ripped them a new one. Everyone who knew had been wholly loving and supportive. In terms of living arrangements, they'd spent that first night after the confession at Katsuki's apartment. There was no funny business, thank you very much. But there were a lot of heavy make-out sessions, cuddling, and talking things over, as well as many shared whispered affirmations of their love for one another. They'd both finished work the next day and gone back to their respective homes, promising to arrange to see each other outside of work as soon as possible, only for Deku to be asked to aid another hero agency in their search for a villain with an amazing lava quirk. At least those were Deku's words on the matter. This meant that for nearly the whole week Deku was away from Katsuki, and after work he was so exhausted that he'd not even make it to his bed, sleeping in his clothes on the couch instead. By the time Thursday had rolled around, Katsuki had had enough. He didn't confess all his feelings and talk through all the complex 𝗧𝗏𝗏 with the nerd just to never see him. The texts and calls were great, when they actually had time to exchange them. All of a sudden, their hero ranks and hard work just seemed to have put them in a position that kept them apart. So, with all that playing on his mind, Katsuki had grabbed his keys at 1 a.m. and thought of this. He'd left his apartment and sped to Deku's on his bike. When he got up to Deku's apartment, he'd banged on his door with 0 FS given, knowing the nerd would be dead to the world. After a few minchus and one angry neighbor who Katsuki told to F off, a very sleepy Izuku had opened the door slightly, eyes widening in shock when he saw Katsuki there with an overnight bag. "Kaken," he'd said, now fully awake. Katsuki had pushed his way into the apartment, slammed and locked the door, thrown down his bag and bike helmet, and scooped up a bewildered Izuku. "I'm sick of not seeing you, nerd," Katsuki said into his boyfriend's shoulder. "I'm staying here." Deku didn't say a word, he just hung onto Katsuki like a koala as he maneuvered them to the bedroom where they laid down in each other's embrace. From then on, Katsuki had only gone home to get more clothes or toiletries. His things slowly started to gather in Izuku's apartment. Deku had felt bad, protesting to Katsuki that they could stay at his home too, but the blonde would never admit that Deku's apartment felt more like home than his own. After a few weeks of this, Deku had taken the initiative to give Katsuki a proposition. He didn't want Katsuki to feel like the apartment wasn't his own space, so despite Katsuki saying he didn't mind, Deku wanted to compromise and asked nervously if the blonde would like to find a new apartment together. "Th, are you asking me to move in with you, nerd?" Katsuki had smirked down at a blushing Deku as they laid in bed on a rare morning off together. Why yes. But I know it's fast, and I get it you don't 𝗬𝗏. He had been shut up by Katsuki's soft pink lips, attacking him full force and pushing him back into the bed. "It's not too fast, shitty Deku. Was me moving half my SHT in here not enough of a thing hint?" Katsuki barked laughter, then frowned. "I couldn't stand another day not waking up to you. And, this way, if we're not together at work, at least we're together at home." Deku had beamed, stroking his boyfriend's cheek. "Then let's find somewhere that's not mine, or yours, but ours, Kaken." So ever since they'd been looking for a new apartment, but it was a slow process around their busy hero schedules, so in the meantime Katsuki had moved into Deku's place. He'd finally admitted to the nerd that his place felt like home and smelled like home. Smelled like Deku, aromas of fresh-cut grass and something fruity. When Katsuki discovered the nerd's strawberry-scented shower products, he couldn't help chuckle to himself and figured that explained it. As far as being NTMT, they'd had that conversation too. It was a little awkward at first, but Katsuki had a little bit more experience than Izuku and he'd initiated their first session of heavy petting. They had finally explored all of each other's bodies, and although Izuku refused to be completely naked in front of Katsuki, he'd consented to Katsuki going down on him, and he'd wanted to return the favor too. In fact, he'd whined to do so when Katsuki tried to reassure him that he didn't have to, and dear God, it was better than Katsuki could have hoped for. He'd stared into those gorgeous green eyes the whole time, just like he'd always wanted to, with his heart hammering in his chest the whole time and adoration in his red eyes as looked down at his lover. They were both quick learners and after their first tastes of one another they devoured each other as often as they could. Despite this though, they still hadn't gone all the way. Katsuki didn't want to rush it. He wanted the nerd to be ready, and the fact that he wouldn't let Katsuki see him fully naked yet made the blonde believe he was definitely not ready, and troubled him for another reason. Did Izuku think Katsuki wouldn't like his body? It was clear that Deku was self-conscious in front of the blonde, but Katsuki could not for the life of him figure out why. He'd of course seen parts of Deku's body before, but never fully naked and on display. One evening when the blonde passed the bathroom door, Izuku had been looking at his bare back in the mirror, one hand reaching around to trace his newest scar with a deep frown on his face. In that instant Katsuki realized the issue, and he rushed away from the bathroom before Deku saw him. The nerd didn't like his scars. Katsuki has probably seen all of his scars at one point or another. He loved every bit of Izuku, scars and all. Clearly he needed to show the nerd that. Katsuki had decided it was about time to put an end to Deku's feelings of insecurity by worshipping his body in all the way the blonde had always wanted to. One Deku had been sitting in bed in his all-might pajamas reading a newly published study on late quirk manifestation when Katsuki had walked in wearing his usual black tank and baggy black jogging bottoms. He'd stood at the foot of the bed in the soft glow of the lamplight and Deku had glanced up smiling at him. When Katsuki hadn't moved, Deku had put his book down on the bed to give his boyfriend his full attention. "What's up, Kaken?" His head had tilted adorably, eyes questioning Katsuki's serious expression. Katsuki pulled off his tank top, letting it fall to the floor, and pointed to the scar on his abdomen from years earlier. "Do you think this is ugly?" he'd asked. "Of course not, Kaken." The blonde had then stripped off his jogging bottoms, kicking them aside, and pointing to a scar on his thigh. "What about this one?" Deku's eyebrows had shot up before furrowing. He rushed forward on the bed, book forgotten, getting on his knees to cup Katsuki's face in his hands. "No, Kaken. I don't think any part of you is ugly, especially not your scars. Where is this coming from?" "Why?" Katsuki had asked, as he'd met Izuku's gaze. "Because they are appealing, Kaken," he'd said, tracing the scar on Katsuki's abs with his pale fingers. "They're reminders of everything you've been through, how strong you are, how strong your body is, and every time you fought to be here. I love every part of you." Katsuki had softly moved his hands to hold Izuku's shoulders, peering into his green eyes. "Then why do you hide your body from me, Izuku? Do you think your scars are ugly?" Izuku's breath had hitched in his throat as he realized what Katsuki had been trying to achieve with his display, and he'd looked away ashamed, letting his hands drop to his sides. Katsuki had known at that moment he was right. He'd brought his hand up to turn Izuku's face back to meet his gaze once more. "Every single scar you have proves the same DMN thing you just said about mine, Izuku. They are gorgeous, appealing, amazing, just like you." There were tears dancing in green eyes now. "Let me show you how much I love your body, Izuku. Please." Katsuki had asked in the softest voice he could muster. Izuku had only nodded, throwing himself into the blonde's strong arms. That night, Katsuki had slowly removed Izuku's clothes and caressed, kissed and praised every part of his perfect body, whispering against his firm pale flesh. All of these experiences had been amazing, the pair enjoying every moment of their new relationship, even the rougher parts because they were together and all they needed was each other. Now, 2 months, 2 weeks and 3 days into this new relationship, Izuku was sitting in his office frowning down at his unfinished report. After everything they'd already been through in their lives, and all of their recent explorations of one another, Izuku had decided that he wanted to take it all the way with Kaken. He had in fact decided that a couple of days after the blonde had kissed over every scar on his body, and used his appealing mouth to make Izuku's head spin and his legs turn to jelly. Izuku had then done what he does best. He'd researched everything he could about sex with another man. And boy, did he learn a lot. Probably too much, but it's best to be over-prepared, he'd assured himself. He was glad he'd looked into it. Obviously he knew where it was supposed to go, but there was a lot of preparation involved that he had never really thought about. He'd also read about tops and bottoms, and decided he would at some point like to try doing both, but assumed that for their first time together Kaken would likely be the person to top. Izuku had blushed thinking about letting Kaken do that to him, but the way his body reacted south of the border definitely told him that he wanted to do this. So, when a party was organized for Mina and Kiri's housewarming, Izuku had decided that when they got home that night he was going to instigate sex with his boyfriend. He'd ordered some things they'd need online under a fake name. No way the #1 pro hero was buying these at a store, including condoms, lube and some things to help him prepare himself. Izuku could at least admit to himself that he quite liked the idea of Kaken not using a condom. Okay, fine, he still blushed even thinking about it, and they were both up to date with their healthcare visits at work, so they should be okay without, but he'd bought them as an option. On the day of the party, while Kaken was still at work, Izuku had done the necessary preparations, placing the items they'd need in his bedside drawer. They'd gone to the party with Kaken none the wiser, but when Izuku kept looking nervous and Kaken was asking questions, he panicked and said he had an upset stomach earlier that day. Super seki Izuku, God I'm an idiot. After some back and forth, convincing Kaken he was okay now, and he'd let him know if they needed to leave, they'd started mingling with their friends. Izuku had been in the kitchen getting drinks for them both when Kiri had come up beside him to restock the counter with beer. "Mido, is everything okay with you and Bakugou? You seem a bit on edge tonight, dude," he asked, looking at Izuku worriedly. "Oh gosh, no Kiri, we're great. It's a nothing like that," he stuttered, blushing. Kiri raised a brow at him. "Dude, you're literally sweating from me just asking that. What's going on?" Heck." Izuku took a deep breath. "I want to sleep with Kaken tonight." He rushed the sentence out before it could crawl back down his throat. Kiri began to laugh, holding onto the counter to steady himself. There's no need to laugh at me," Izuku grumbled. "I'm so sorry, Mido, I am honestly." Kiri shook his head, grinning at his friend. "It's just that you really don't need to be so nervous, my man. Bakugou has wanted to do that with you forever. He's just been waiting for you to be ready. Didn't wanna rush you. You'll have no problems getting him into bed if you let him know it's what you want, dude." Kiri's encouragement did wonders for Izuku's confidence, and he nodded back with a small nervous smile on his face. "Plus, he's totally been saving himself for you, dude. He literally waited for you. He's going to be over the moon, don't you think?" Kiri smirked, handing Izuku his drinks. Izuku couldn't help but snort a laugh. "I guess you're right. I forgot you knew about that." Kiri winked at him, before gesturing back to the living room. The K&K in Izuku's plans occurred when they stepped into the room, seeing Kaken and Denki at the beer pong table with empty shot glasses lined up on the table's edge. Zero stood in the middle, refilling the shots with vodka. A crowd had gathered and Kaken scored another cup against Denki, yelling, "In your stupid face, dunce." Kiri gave Izuku a look, and they both made their way over to the match. "What you doing, Kaken?" he asked. Kaken snaked an arm around Izuku's waist, pulling him close. "Dunce challenged me to win 5 rounds out of 5. The blonde replied, kissing his cheek softly as Denki scored his cup. Kaken yelled, taking his shot with his free hand. "And how is that going?" Izuku asked skeptically. "It's 4-3 to Kat," Zero confirmed cheerily. "They've played 7 rounds. Kiri exclaimed. "Yeah, and this round I'm gonna beat the 𝗧𝗧. Kaken said confidently as he swayed slightly. Denki didn't look to be faring any better. Yes, Kaken was amazing at everything and eventually won the bet, but he'd already had a few drinks before they'd started playing and being drunk hadn't improved his game. By the time Izuku was putting a very drunk Kaken into the private taxi, Kiri was mouthing a "sorry bro" at Izuku, who waved off his apology with a smile that couldn't completely hide his disappointment. It wasn't Kiri's fault. Denki did the one thing Kaken couldn't resist: he challenged him. Izuku had sighed when he tucked the clingy blonde up in bed, and was pulled into his chest and squeezed tightly in large tanned arms. All the preparation was for nothing. Izuku stared at his report a bit harder. If looks could kill, there would have been multiple murders in the surrounding area because he had been in a foul mood all day. Izuku had prepared the week prior, and when Katsuki had gotten home he'd collapsed on the bed instantly. Izuku couldn't bring himself to wake him. He was aiming for third time lucky. He was frustrated and annoyed that his plans kept getting messed up, so today he had told Kaken that when he got home tonight he had a surprise gift for him. He'd told him he needed some time to organize his gift before he could give it to him. Kaken had looked confused this morning when Izuku had told him, but just teased it at him and told him he didn't need any gifts, which only made the greenette roll his eyes. Izuku sighed, rubbing his face and glancing at the clock. "Okay Izu, finish this report and call it a day. Let's do this." He started writing with renewed determination, and finished 30 minutes later. He left the office by the back stairs, hoping to see less people and have fewer delays on his way out. He made it to the car without issue and let out a long relieved breath when he parked up outside his apartment building. "I'm home," he called when he entered the apartment, trying not to let his nerves show. Kaken popped his head out of the kitchen, leaning over the small breakfast island. "You're home on time for once, nerd." Yeah, I have to sort that gift out I got you," he smiled softly, combing a hand through his curls. I told you I don't need any shitty gifts, Deku," Kaken said, walking over to place a kiss on Izuku's forehead. He had a black t-shirt and jeans on, having had the day at home. "Well, I think you'll like it anyway, Kaken," Izuku said, slipping off his shoes and bag. Anyway, I'm gonna go shower before I do anything else. Katsuki plopped down on the couch. Okay, nerd. Okay, so far so good, Izuku thought, rushing to the bathroom. He did all his necessary business, then double-checking the door was locked, he rooted around under the sink and pulled out a towel. Wrapped inside were the implements with which he'd make himself ready. He showered and prepared himself. It took him some time to deem himself clean and ready to insert the object he knew would make it easier for Kaken to put in his. Well, you know. He knew from his research that they could do some of these steps together in the bedroom, but for the first time he thought it best to get himself ready. For when he was happy he'd done as much as he could, and with the tool still holding him open and ready, he put on some brand new black boxers. He definitely could not wear All Might-themed underwear right now, and his forest green dressing gown. He tamed his hair a little, swiped his phone from the counter and headed for their bedroom. The sensation was a little strange when he walked, and he of course had not taken this step the first time he planned this, but he had the second time and boy was it a strange but RSNG feeling. He'd actually felt a little disappointed at the empty feeling when he'd had to remove it and crawl into bed with the sleeping Kaken. Once he was closed in the bedroom he put his phone on silent and popped it on his bedside table with the lube and condoms. He was making this as obvious as possible for Kaken to get when he came into the room. He put on the bedside lamps and turned off the overhead light to help set the mood. Then he knelt on the bed, took a deep breath, and yelled for his boyfriend. He heard a faint "What, nerd? Can you come here please, Kaken?" Izuku called, his heartbeat already rocketing, his breaths deep, and his stomach doing backflips. Kaken's voice grew louder as he grew closer. "What do you want?" The blonde's words trailed off as he opened the bedroom door, taking in Deku knelt on the bead in his robe. Can you, close the door please Kaken?" Izuku tried to remain confident, but he could feel the redness creeping up his neck and face, and put your phone on silent please. For he kept his green eyes fixed on Katsuki's red ones, seeing the blonde swallow hard before doing as he was asked. Katsuki placed his now silenced phone on the dresser and stalked towards Deku. "What's this about Izuku?" he asked, his eyes snapping to the bedside table. He hid the surprise well, but Izuku saw it flash across his face. He really had pulled it off. Kaken wasn't expecting this. With a rush of confidence from the fact he'd managed to keep a secret from Kaken, he untied his robe, letting it fall open to reveal his pale-toned body to the blonde. "This is your gift Kaken. I want to be with you. Completely. In every way," he said, his face red with embarrassment, but his words were earnest and firm. Katsuki's mouth gaped a little, he shook his head as he cupped Izuku's face. "Are you sure nerd? We can wait if you dash." Izuku put his hand over Kaken's mouth. "We've waited long enough, Kaken. We both saved ourselves for each other. I'm ready. I have been for a while. I just couldn't find the perfect time. But now I see, any time is perfect as long as it's with you." Izuku was surprised to see Katsuki's eyes had gone glassy, and he blinked several times to clear the gathering tears, before pulling the shorter male into a tight embrace. "Shitty nerd, making me soppy and Izuku laughed into his shoulder, before pulling back to look at him. "So, do you wanna dash?" "Of course I wanna, for F's sake Deku," Kaken laughed, caressing Izuku's cheek. "I've never wanted anything more." Deku let out a gorgeous giggle, all his nerves seemingly leaving him as Katsuki brought their lips together. Katsuki's clothes were soon shed down to his underwear, Izuku's robe forgotten on the bed as they lost themselves in each other, mapping out their bodies with roaming fevered hands. Katsuki removed their underwear, maneuvering himself above Izuku, his elbows resting on each side of the brunette's head, one hand in his green curls, just like he'd always imagined except 100 times better. Izuku blushed furiously, trying to hide his face against Katsuki's forearm. Katsuki nuzzled his face. "What's wrong nerd, do you wanna stop?" "It's okay if no Kaken." Izuku shouted unintentionally in his rush to correct him. "I don't wanna stop, it's just embarrassing. It's the first time for both of us Izuku. I just hope I don't F it up and leave you unsatisfied." Katsuki chuckled nervously, making Izuku laugh softly. "You won't Kaken," he whispered against the other's lips. "You never have." They kissed softly, and Deku grabbed the courage to speak up. Okay, I prepared myself for why you already, he stuttered, shyly looking away. For Katsuki brought his face back towards him, smirking, Deku, that's hot. Izuku could not get any redder, and boy was it warm right now, the two of them pressed together, skin on skin. Katsuki raised himself on one hand and reached down to where he was lying between Deku's slightly spread legs. Deku held his breath as Katsuki's fingers grazed the end of the object inside him. His breathing grew heavy as Katsuki's eyes widened. Izuku, Kaken peppered kisses over Izuku's face as he spoke, you did all this for me. You're perfect, in every way, you know that. Izuku ran his hands over the blonde's broad back and up into his hair, you are too Kaken. Nah, nerd, no one can compare to you. Katsuki said, leading them into a deep kiss, rutting against the man below him, earning sweet gasping MMMS when they rubbed together. Katsuki sat back a little and reached his hand out for the condoms. Izuku placed a soft hand on Katsuki's larger one, looking away from him, if you wanna go without that's okay. He whispered. Deku, as great as that would feel, this will still be great too, I'm not gonna make you do that. Katsuki whispered back, but Izuku still held his hand in place. Green eyes came back to red, determination glittering within. I actually want to feel. To feel it. You know, at the end. Katsuki can't breathe at this point, because DMN, not only is this appealing man wanting to let him do this, but he also feels safe and comfortable enough to say what he wants. That's a world away from where his relationship with Deku had once been. Katsuki pulls his hand back, kissing Deku's smaller palm and leading it into his hair. If that's what you want, Izuku, then I don't care. Whatever you want, it's yours. He says breathlessly against Izuku's lips. They fumble their way through the next few minutes together, hungrily, needily, frenzied, connecting to each other finally in every way. When they are finally completing one another, their bodies fitting together perfectly like two pieces of the same puzzle, their movements start to change. This was no longer fast or ferocious. This was slow, deliberate, every movement and caress savored. Every whispered word is passionate, reassuring, devoted. It's everything both of them ever dreamed it would be, folded in the other's embrace, impossibly close. Katsuki didn't have to dream about this moment any longer. Deku is his, and he is Deku's. They keep their eyes on one another, breathing in the other's breaths, sweat trickling along rippling muscles, breathing breaths, sweet MMMS, and low grunts filling the room heavy with lust and love. Katsuki watches Deku writhe beneath him, red and sweaty, curls plastered to his forehead and pleasure across his face. It's his new favorite face he's ever seen Deku make, and he reminds himself no one else gets to see this but him, and promises himself no one else will ever get to see it, he'll be his forever. His heart soars as his lover lets it be known he's close now, and so is Katsuki. They delve deeper into each other, Izuku's lips latching onto Katsuki's shoulder as they ride out the storm together. When they are both spent, with Katsuki laying on Izuku's chest, the brunette lets a bubbly laugh roll from him, and the blonde can't help but join him, and they caress one another's sweaty bodies, exchanging quick kisses. Thanks for my gift, you. I'm glad I waited for it, nerd. Katsuki smirks, brushing his boyfriend's hair back from his face. Me too, Kaken, I wouldn't change a thing. He smiles. Don't get me wrong, that was frickin' amazing, Kaken, but can we clean up now? I'm covered in my own. Izuku can't help laughing again, hiding his face in his hands. Katsuki barks a laugh, sitting back on his heels and stretching, I guess we should nerd. The blonde leaves the bed, and lifts his gorgeous boyfriend from the bed. Izuku wraps his strong arms and legs around him, as Kaken makes his way to the bathroom. Hey, Kaken, can I maybe try being on top next time? Izuku asks, blushing as he nuzzles into the larger man's shoulder. If do, well I guess I did say whatever you wanted you could have, nerd. I'm only letting you do it once, nerd. He grumbles, feeling that role may not be for him, but who's he kidding? He'd do anything the shitty nerd asked him to. I love you, Kaken. Yeah, I know, do, I love you too, you little a. He chuckles as Izuku giggles, now let's get cleaned up and relax. Yes sir, Lord Explosion Murder. Deku laughs adorably, clinging to the blonde. Katsuki smirked, squeezing him tightly. Sassy little 𝐕.